Hi, sorry. Hello, hello, hello. I'm so sorry for the delay. What was happening was one of the things I need to do in order to control my chat is log into my account. And when I logged into my account, it wouldn't it wouldn't verify. I was dealing with technical issues. Sorry, that might have been too much information. But hello. Hello, welcome. I'm going to be moving a little slow today. That's just the nature of using this setup, but it has the better microphone. So as always, this is the one I choose. Hello, 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 welcome. Oh, hold on, let me adjust something. This is this one. Gotta get this one here. Okay, very small detail, but important to me. Hi, Nest. Hi, Angel. Welcome in. I'm very excited and glad that you guys are all here for the very first book club. You only managed to finish episode 2. That is okay. I totally understand. It has been a week. I totally get it. It has definitely been a week for me as well. I actually wanted to get more into the book. I had like a bunch of research I wanted to do, and I just was never able to do it. But I still hope you were able to enjoy the book, and maybe after hearing the discussion today, you will want to finish it. But let me just say, first off, welcome to book club. Also, for those of you who have been through one of the book clubs before or have watched the VODs, I do apologize for one thing. I will not be fully recapping the book. Now, I find that when I recap the book, I really focus in on details because I think they're important. And actually, the truth is, I want to discuss those details. Instead, I end up recapping the book, and that's why my last book club was 4 hours, and I only managed to not only recap the book and didn't manage to do much of discussion at all. So my focus this time will just be on discussion. So I'm going to move in with the assumption that you guys have read the book, and if you haven't, that's okay. Maybe after the discussion you'll want to finish it, or maybe you'll feel that, the discussion was enough for you. That's also fine. The point is to try and read some interesting books and to talk about it. I have a lot of thoughts. Your internet is a little choppy. So I've heard that YouTube is also dealing with lag when it comes to live streams, so it may not even be with you guys, so please don't worry. I will say that on my part, it has been choppy for some live streams. I was trying to watch one of the official co-streams for the Game Awards, because I was, oops, hold on. I don't know why the chat isn't working. Hold on. I actually should have your guys' chat on screen. The chat might start working later, but if it doesn't show up, that's okay. I can still read it there. You should have more time the week after next. That's totally okay. This has definitely been a crazy month. And you know what? That's why I do think a month works out better for book club, because a lot of people may have their own schedule, and sometimes it's just tough. Some months be like that. But I do hope you still enjoyed it, Double Red. I was trying to remember what I was talking about. I kind of lost my train of thought because I got really bothered by how, I can see you guys on chat here, and I can't see chat on screen. Anyways, let's get right into it. The first thing I'm going to ask you guys is a poll. This is, you love the book so much. Honestly, good. I'm really glad to hear that. Let me start a poll so we can start with some engagement. I'm also going to give out free memberships today. So if anyone wants to receive them, this is your time to make sure your account can accept gifted memberships. Now, before we're going to ask... Okay. I think... Yep, okay. Very simple questions starting us off. Did you enjoy the book? Alright, okay. So for me, the first time I read this book, I actually was like, it's interesting. But there wasn't, and this is going to be an odd expression, but bear with me as I explain it. There didn't feel like there was a lot to chew on. And I kind of was asking myself, because there were some moments that stood out to me, and I guess in that way, I really related to Otoha, which is the main character, in that I kept thinking of moments that kind of gave me a pause, that made me want to, like, is there something there? Am I reading too much into it, you know? And then I didn't reread it, but I went back to those moments and I kind of started writing things down. And for me, it was kind of like being back in school. I wrote like my initial thoughts and questions I had, and then I started taking notes and summarizing. I did end up with a bunch of notes. I will try to go through them all, but we're gonna do it as a discussion this time. And for me, I did really end up enjoying the book. I'm planning to reread it. Oh, I should also mention, so if you guys check the community posts, they should have gone live. I scheduled 2 posts. One is a regular post, one is a members post. I did make bookmarks inspired by this book. So if you guys enjoyed it, one of my things I really wanted to do for book club is to have the jelly buds, blooms, and blossoms kind of like explore through the worlds that we go through in these books. I feel like there were other designs I could have gone for, but I kind of wanted to reflect the cover. And it is all my own assets. I didn't use the book assets. But I do have those available to you. And I also have alternative backs for the previous bookmark designs I released. These are completely free. And the alternative backs is actually a reading log. So that if you guys want to track your own personal reading or book club reading, whichever one works for you, you can do so. Now, if you guys want a bigger version, please let me know. Glad to make them. I wasn't sure. So I just made them in the bigger bookmark size. And members do have, because the members had their own alternative designs, I did do alternative backs for them as well. So if you are in members or regular, you do have bookmarks that you can redeem or collect. It's not even redeem. The story is so cozy. You wish it had more chapters. That is also fair. We will get more into that. That would have been a great transition question if I had prepared. I do have like a couple discussion questions I prepared. I prepared 15, and I thought that was a bit much, but I felt some of them were very natural discussion points. So we will go more into that, but it makes me really happy to hear. Before we continue, I'm going to send out the 10 gifted memberships. All right, we got 5. Welcome to the book club. Oh, wait, I see it. Oh, so that's when the chat starts working? Hold on. I see the chat. Okay. Wait, over here. Okay. The technology, it's disobeying me. All right, I don't know why only the gifted memberships show up and nothing else. I'm going to give out 5 more. Last 5 for this month. I am giving them out during book club. Hehe. There we go. Welcome to the membership. Alright. I'm going to end the poll. I am curious about one more question. I will say one of the things I wish I'd been able to do was to make an book club exclusive asset, I guess. And I tried ways and I ultimately wasn't able to, unfortunately. I am using this, but know that in my heart, I did try. Sorry, it's because like on this setup, I have a better microphone. Everything is a little slow. So, ooh, congrats. Welcome to membership. All right, I'm going to end the poll because I do have another poll I want to ask you guys. I'm really glad to hear you did enjoy it though. The next poll I'm going to ask is, how many options can I add? Okay, only 4. Oops. Da-da-da-dum. Oh, shoot. Okay. We are going to... I'm gonna have to do this one by one. Back! Nope. Where did that come from? There it is. So, I apparently just changed outfits in front of you guys. Don't worry, it's fine. It was just because I have programmed my hotkeys. I thought I had changed all my hotkeys to not have that happen. I will be refraining from more number typing in the future. I'll type them all out. We'll type one with all the letters. For me personally, I actually give this book probably 4 stars. Now, like I said, at first I thought it was just a very cozy book, and it was great. I enjoyed it a lot. I think the translator did a great job with it. However, I do feel like there was still more I wish I could go into with the book. And I think number one is because I am lacking a lot of context. There is a lot of references made to different authors, and I feel like if I had that knowledge, maybe my rating would change. Also, I just feel like you guys said, wish there were more, because it kind of, this is something we'll discuss a little more later, but I wished it had been a little longer. At least one more chapter, I think, would have been good to wrap it up. But I do understand why the author kind of ended it the way they did, and that goes a lot into what I consider to be, I guess, the theme and the things that she was trying to convey in the book. As someone who doesn't read, the short form factor is easy to adjust. I agree. I do think that this book was super short, but it also made it so easy to get into it. I feel like the author did a really good job in that regard in crafting a world that was very easy to, it's not just understand, but sort of like, it was engaging. They managed to engage the reader really well and build the story, I think, very clearly. Makes you want to read the books they mentioned, though you did know some of them. I agree. I actually did do some very superficial research into some of the books, so I can go into those a little more as we discuss. Allowing for the final kind of discussion, I think it's really interesting. Yay, I'm really glad that you all rate it so highly. I mean, it would have been fine even if you didn't enjoy it, although, because at the end of the day, that's what this is for, discussion. All right. Hold on, I wanted to see the results of the poll. I did see the winning result. I didn't get to see the... Oh, where'd it go? Well... Oh, I can see it in my other chat. I can't see it in this one. Weird. Yeah, okay, so everyone rated it pretty highly. That's great. All right. Sorry, it's because usually I start this off with, like, talking about the book, and now I'm trying a new format. I hope you guys will be patient. So, let me bring up the first discussion topic so it'll be a little easier for me. I was also a little frantic, not gonna lie. I did the whole jump in my chair, slide across the room because I was running late. But I'm really excited to be talking about this with you. I really do have a lot to talk about, and you will be able to tell based on some of these topics. So one of the things I did want to ask is, did you guys notice any symbolism or like reoccurring motif? And I mean like as a symbol. And the reason I bring that up is because you see on the cover there is a cat. Now I know the cat is bright orange, but if there's anything I have learned about Japanese literature is they really like cats. So I was fully expecting for there to be a cat to be like, I guess to be convey something, to do something, to, I don't know, even just be a part of the narrative. Maybe it would have been used as a device. And there was no cat. There were like zero cats in the story. And I was a little disappointed, not gonna lie, because I thought that would have been really interesting. I do think that while they did use some symbols, and they did make references, and I can go a little more into that, in things like certain names and certain objects they chose, I don't think they actually had something that represented the story besides the library itself. Now, I actually had a purpose for this because I was trying to make a stamp. So, if I can explain it, I used to have a reading log and I would make like stamps for the different stories I read, and I was gonna make one for this one, could not figure it out because I couldn't think of an actual symbol. Her name, you don't know what it means, but it keeps getting brought up. Was there a cat? There was not a cat nest. Now, I actually did try to look up what Otaha means. Let me see if I can look that up. Hold on. The thing is, we don't know the kanji. I forgot. That's a good point, because I actually was trying to look it up. Because there are a lot of meanings for things like this. There are so many kanji. I don't know how they choose to use it. But for now, it seems the most common. Oh, no. They did. Because her name was based off of... It was her last name. Different character that means leaf or something. Yes, you're right. In the very... I said I read the book. Let me go back. So in the first part of the book, she explains that everyone hears her name and asks her what her name means. And then she always tells them that it's based off of an author. But instead of... It's a character meaning leaf. Okay, so the most common combination is sound and leaf, spring and leaf. But we only know it's a leaf. Now, a leaf can mean a lot of things. It can be a symbol of growth. It can be a symbol of spring, a symbol of rebirth, a symbol of freshness. I guess it depends on how you want to interpret it, but it actually goes really well with what I was going to talk about. Because one of the things that is also, I think, recurring, it's not a motif, it's not a symbol, but I don't know if you guys have probably noticed, they bring up Anne of Green Gables a lot. Like a lot. It is something that is continuously brought up. I do have like a connection to it for the theme, just me personal, in my personal thoughts. But I do also think that if Otaha's name does mean leaf, and that's the only thing they expand on, because unfortunately we don't get to see what the other kanji means. And I think this is one of those things where, because we are reading the translated version, although I do think it's a great translation, we do miss out on some of the context, because in a lot of Asian languages, so many of the characters are so contextual. There is so much nuance and a lot of times a lot of puns. A lot of puns, like names are chosen really intentionally. So unfortunately, we don't know what the other kanji is. We can only make our inferences, but we do know that the author specifically emphasized that her name has the character for leaf. Fitting for Otaha than being the new person there. Agreed. She is, in fact, I think the newest worker besides Tokuda, who is also the one who came before her. And then before that, I think, was Manami. So she is the newest, and she's also fairly young. She and Manami are actually the same age. So compared to everyone else who is there, she is not only the newest, but she is also fairly young. I think it's Higuchi, right? Otaha Higuchi. The spelling is important. Yeah, Higuchi. Higuchi. Like I said, we can, one of the things about Japanese, Chinese names is that because they use kanji, there are different kanjis you can use that sound the same, but they mean entirely different things, especially when put together with different words. So because we don't know which kanji is being used for Otaha's name, unfortunately, even if we do know the hiragana, it's going to be a little difficult for us to like figure out the actual meaning behind her name. And actually, speaking on that note, I would have really liked to know the meaning of everyone's names. Like I said, a lot of Japanese writers and a lot of Chinese writers as well, they really like sneaking in puns and like meaning into names because the kanji is so diverse in that regard. It's a little unfortunate for us. I kind of feel like it'd be really interesting, and one of the things that I always say, that if I could wish for anything and you had multiple wishes, one of my wishes would always be to have complete fluency in speaking, reading, and writing, in other languages, because I do think it opens you up to so much in seeing how people express it in their native language. Yeah. Yeah, but it was... For me, otherwise, there isn't really... Maybe there is symbolism and I missed it, because I'll be honest. I only spent this week kind of going back into my notes and like really diving into my initial questions and trying to answer them myself. So maybe there is symbolism I missed. But ultimately, it was because I kind of wanted to make a stamp. It would have been really fun. Let me go on to the next one. The next one. Hold on. Nope. Okay, that is this one. So which character was your favorite in the series? Personally, for me, I don't have a favorite character. I really enjoyed hearing it from Otoha's perspective, because I did relate a lot to her, but I don't think I have like a favorite character per se. I think all the characters were really interesting in the different things and the different ways they were trying to... Well, a lot of what I'm speaking of is based on my own interpretation of the theme, which we'll go into. But what they represent, I thought was really interesting. But I don't really have a character I particularly like. It would, honestly. I would love to be able to fully understand Chinese and Japanese. A lot of my reading is in those languages. Manager? Oh, Sasai. He was a good character. Honestly, Sasai is a really interesting character. I do think that hearing his story kind of explained a lot of his behavior. And also, it gave a lot of context for... How do I say this? So Sai is one of those characters where at first you kind of like, oh, he's just I don't mean this in a bad way, but like a typical Japanese character, in that he's very polite, that he does what he needs to do, and of course I'm just generalizing. But then as you hear about his backstory, you really get context into why he does things the way he does, and it also makes it interesting when you contrast like why everyone was surprised when Otoha explains on that first day that Sasai did the... What was it? He didn't do open sesame. What did he say when he was facing that automatic door the first day? Hold on. It was... Oh, there it is. Character you'll... Oh, okay. No, she didn't give any other. Open the door. I'll open the door. He said, open the door. And I feel like it's really interesting that he was very playful with Otoha when he first met. He actually has one of my favorite lines in the book, which is, "Are you Anne?" And it's like that very first moment where he meets Otoha. And for some reason, that moment got really stuck in my head. One of those things that I explored, and it's one of the reasons why Anne of Green Gables, the first mention I think of Anne of Green Gables in the book, the unraveling of all my research. Another character I actually did really enjoy was Manami. I think she gave a really interesting contrast to Otoha in terms of like motivation, and also in terms of... How do I say this? Because Manami is the same age as Otoha, but a lot of her internal journey is so different. So I think it highlights a lot of Otoha's choices in comparison. So I actually really enjoyed Manami's character as well. Sasai is so funny for you. You relate to Masako, the most, being a fellow book dragon. Yeah, Manami's first person POV. Like, it was... If there was a plot twist in the book, I think that would be one of them. One of the first plot twists you kind of get to see is Manami's perspective. And I think that for me, there's intention behind it. And of course, this is just my own conjecture. But it was definitely a shock, wasn't it? To see and hear her true thoughts, which is why I actually enjoyed the different character perspectives. I do think, how do I say this? I feel like it was not jarring, but I was a little caught off guard at first. I do think the transition was good, but I was still caught off guard by the sudden perspective shift in some cases. But I still enjoyed it because I think it's a great way to get to know the characters in such a short book. You really got to know instantly their motivations, and you also established their own world as a character. I'm trying to be concise and proper when I'm saying it. Masako being a book dragon is like one of my favorite things, and honestly, if one of my goals is to be financially stable enough that I can buy all the books I want without having to worry about storage or like worrying about buying the books, my goal. So personally, I don't have a favorite character, but always interesting to hear what you guys enjoy, who you guys liked. Now, what I was gonna say, which character did you relate to the most? How did their view of reading and books resonate with you, if at all? So I feel like Ness, you already kind of answered this with Masako being a book dragon. Don't do it. I am a book dragon myself, so I have accumulated quite a personal collection. If I ever were to make a book focused channel, one of the first videos I'd probably make is every book I've bought since in the first half of 2026, and it's substantial. I won't say it's a lot because I'm sure compared to some other people's hauls it's not a lot, but it's quite a bit. I have enough to talk about. The first guard lady or the janitor, no need to chat. I see. So the first guard lady, Kitozawa, I believe. I'm gonna double check my little character chart here. Character list, not chart. Where did she go? Kitazato. Kitazato is the front desk technician or the janitor, Kobayashi. I feel like both of them were really interesting characters, and I'll be honest, I thought Kitazato would have more of a role because there's always like, how do I say this? One of the first characters you meet, besides Sasai, usually has some significance, but I was really, in contrast, surprised and later realized that if someone else is giving the backstory of a character, they are not as important to the current narrative. And I thought that was a really interesting trick, a really interesting technique that Harada-san used. Because when we get the direct POV, we know that they kind of play more of a role in the narrative. But when someone else is explaining their backstory, then they kind of are more of a supporting cast. Definitely a tough one. For me, the character, I think I mentioned this earlier, that relate to the most is definitely Otoha. Because books are really important in my life, and I will be honest, one of my dream jobs was always to either work in a bookstore or in a library. And for a lot of reasons, I wasn't able to go that route. Although one of my goals is to eventually volunteer at a library once I have more free time, because I do really empathize and like relate to Otaha wanting to be surrounded by books. Now, I do think this night library job is very idealistic. Honestly, it does sound kind of like right up my alley as well. But for also the fact that, how do I say this? To Otaha, I think we can recognize that she is a character who is not very emotional. Like, she has a lot of internal thoughts, but she doesn't really vocalize them like many of the other characters, and is, I think, more typical in probably East Asian culture. But the one thing she gets really passionate and worked up about is books. And I can really relate, because I will admit that I still, and I mean this very lightly, I still get a little heartbroken when I think of the books I gave away. Because for me, every book that's kind of passed through my hands is a world I've explored. It's something that has it has a lot of meaning to me. And this isn't meant to be in like a book hoarding kind of way, but more than so like when I think of the collection I curated for myself, and also for, I am very attached to it, which is why I'm a little attached. I am quite a book dragon myself, although I do try to keep them in good condition. But yeah, I definitely related to her in that, not all of them, but I do have very, very strong feelings for books and for some particular authors. I feel like I've never been someone who is very into singers, if that makes sense. Singers or performers. I'm kind of like, oh, I enjoy their music, but there are some authors where I'm like very excited, wanting to follow them and things like that. So I guess my idolization is more geared towards authors than other kind of celebrities. It's such a dreamy place for books. You like the coziness of working there that it takes you away from your work problems. Yes, I 100% agree. And the thing at the night library is, this is gonna be a little early for my questions, but I do want to answer it because we're on the topic. I feel like for a lot of people, when we say that we want to work and live doing what we love, in the sense at the night library, you don't make a lot. Although Minami does say that you make more at the night library than she would at her part-time job. The night library is very idealistic in that you make enough to be, I would say, like an okay job. You can live on it, but your rent is covered for, right? All you have to do is pay for utilities. You are doing a job that is very unique in that there is a purpose, right? You're preserving the collection of these deceased authors who have entrusted their collection with you, but you are also doing it in a time that is in an environment that's very, I guess, book-oriented, book-focused. Like the people who come in are very more likely to be, and I'm going to say going to be more likely to be people who will respect the books, and it's not just, I guess you would do with less trouble in that regard. Not no trouble, but less trouble. So it is very idealistic, isn't it? Wouldn't mind it. Definitely agree. I will say the only concern is that it is in the mountains. It's kind of like isolated. That is a slight concern. A slight concern. And it's why I understand why Otaha's parents were so concerned. And it does bring up an interesting topic about Otaha as well. But we'll get into it. We'll get into it. Next. I will say that one of the things we never get into is the supporting cast and characters and how they view books. I feel like there is a significance in how the backstories of the characters who did get their POVs were book-oriented. And I think that had significance, personally. I did write that down in my notes. Think of the cool ups up there, though. Yeah, but then you don't have a cool pickaxe to, like, collect things with them. So they're just kind of there. They're just kind of there. Unless you can, like, collect cool ores and gems. Now, which character do you guys think was underrated and you wanted to learn more about? Now, this specifically, I wanted to focus on, like, the characters who didn't get their POV. Because arguably, all the characters who got their POV did kind of get their moment in the narrative to not shine, but they got to add their own voice to the narrative. So is there a supporting character who did not get a POV that you guys wanted to learn more about? For me, I really wanted to learn more about Kitoshita. Wait, let me just make sure I got his name right. Kinoshita, which is the restaurant person who runs the restaurant, as well as the barista from the city. Like, he was a well-known barista. He was actually someone I really wanted to learn more of, and I kind of thought we would until they started explaining his backstory. I was like, oh, sad. And the reason why is because I thought it would have been interesting to hear his perspective as someone who is creating recipes from the books. Like, what happened and how he described it is the owners gave him a bunch of books and they required him to recreate those recipes. And I wanted to know his perspective because he said he doesn't really read, right? But he was very, very careful with the books he read. And he also emphasized, like, how do I say this? There were some authors that he favored more than others, and I thought that would have been an interesting narrative tool as well. He always made you hungry. Yeah, I think the food, although it was simple, like the food was described simple, right? For example, one of the foods was Anna Green Gables plain bread, fresh cucumbers, and butter. And for some reason, the way they explained it also sounded really tasty. So I feel like both the translator did a great job, and also clearly Harada-san also really enjoyed those moments, and that's why she made them chapter titles, which admittedly, I'll be honest, I did not read. I didn't read the chapter titles. I was kind of like reading the story, and normally I would, but when I looked at the top of the page of each chapter, it just said episode 2. And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't know I missed out on the fact that every chapter is named after a food. And you know what I did? Went through the whole book, like skimmed it, in order to list down all the different foods that were listed. Looked at the different days, tried to figure out if I could cross-reference the authors and the food that they, like the authors and the books they wrote in connection to the events that happened in that chapter. I tried to do it. Unfortunately, I found that a lot of the authors that were referenced in this, aside from Anna Green Gables, and I believe the 13th Night, which is the very first story they reference, most of them are from Japanese authors from fairly long ago, and there aren't really a lot of English resources discussing their books. So unfortunately, while I was able to do some shallow, superficial research, I was not able to get as much of a strong or concrete answer as to like common themes they explore, what their books tend to be about, and like I even wanted to try to find the books that reference these recipes. Have I already read Anna Green Gables? Okay, so this is gonna be a bit blasphemous. I have not. So I once had a book series and it was called The Classics. And this was something that Mama Ria bought for me from when I was younger, and I did go through that slowly. I had a bunch of books. I remember reading Black Beauty. I remember reading Little Woman. I remember reading Pride and Prejudice and a bunch of other stories. And I know I had Anne of Green Gables in that collection. And by the way, they were just like paperbacks, but they were really good. And I never reached Anne of Green Gables because what I was doing was I was reading a book every day. And then I went to summer camp. Did not remember to finish the rest, which was blasphemous of me. But I have never read it. I did read a couple summaries just to understand the general story because I wanted to make a couple connections as to some of the references. But no, I do want to put it on my list though. I know there are a bunch of stories where I feel like I really missed out, especially because Anna Green Gables is so popular. Let's not just talk about where it's from. Let's talk about the fact that the Japanese people love the story so much, it frequently gets anime adaptations, and the most recent one, wowza, it did great in Japan. So clearly it's a very beloved story, and there are so many ways that I could have read it and watched it because it has multiple animes, but I just haven't. So I will have to put that on my TBR. Yeah, they also love Heidi, which is super interesting. It's super interesting. Yeah. No, it was really fun. One of my favorite things is being able to dive into books that like and authors who I guess reference with intention. And I do think that there are lots of authors who do reference with intention, but it is so interesting when an author does so in a way that you can make connections. Does it in all these subtle ways. I really like diving into things like that. So let me go over some of the foods with you. So the first was Shirobana, which is Monday by Yakushi Inoue. It's curry with corned beef. Now that one was pretty interesting. I could not find what Yakushi Inoue, who is by the way a male author, what he wrote because very, very old author. And he wrote a lot of essays and a lot of collections, I guess. A lot of the authors, the older authors that is actually referenced here, so a lot of them wrote essays and poetry, and I think that is because of the times. What they likely did was they published these, and some of them do have books, but for the most part, they were essayists and poets. Don't quote me. It was just what I was able to find. But it was very interesting. That one was the only one where Otaha kind of references the food again. Because throughout the book, when she eats the meal, she kind of just eats the meal, enjoys it, and there is a meaning to it. But the first one, Shirobana, is the only one where she references it again at a later point. So at the end, she eats the meal, I think, at the beginning, like near the first half of chapter 1, and then she references it again at the end of chapter 1. It was hard not to munch when reading this book. Yeah. I agree. This is why I told you guys to prepare snacks. Now on Tuesday, this isn't in order. It just so happened that Monday and Tuesday were one after another. But it was Mamaya from Kuniko Makoda, and it was carrot rice. Now, Kuniko Makoda is a female writer, and the only thing I could find was she wrote about a lot of female protagonists. Now, the next one was Anne of Green Gables. We talked about bread, butter, and fresh cucumbers, as well as chocolate caramel. Chocolate caramel, I think, had a significance, but it was more so for Akko. And I think it was very interesting because Kinoshita was brought up again, and I really wanted to dive into what it meant for Kinoshita to say something, and then for Akko to... it could have been subtle, it might not be much, but there is something there I want to explore. And let me just voice it out loud for you guys, and then you guys can tell me if you think of anything. If you don't, at least I mentioned it. So one of the things that Kinoshita does is he puts a chocolate caramel in front of Otaha, and she loves it. It's delicious, it's creamy, and she tells him that he should make this and sell this because not only would fans of Anne of Green Gables love to be able to eat this chocolate caramel that was referenced in the book, but she just thinks it's so good that other people would develop an interest just because of how tasty it was. Sorry, I was reading the chat and I almost lost my train of thought. We're going to continue and then I will go back to chat, I promise. But then Kinoshita says that it's a lot of hard work, and he was basically mixing the pot all day in order to make this, so he doesn't want to make it very often. Now, when Otaha at first tells him that, she would like to ask for a couple extra if that's possible, and he's like, are you planning to enjoy it yourself? She's like, well, actually, I wanted to bring it for Akko and Masako, who are the two older women, and he instantly gives her 2 more, first for herself, and then 2 more for her to bring to Akko and Masako. Now, for me, Otaha is very much... This is going to be a little much, but bear with me. Otaha is who Manami tries to be in the group. So Manami talks about how she figures that because she's the youngest, she kind of needs to be the energetic, fresh, cute little sister of the group, but Otaha kind of does this just by being herself. And I do think that's in part on why Manami feels like she needs to go, amongst other things. Honestly, that just kind of came to me just now. This is why I say things out loud. It helps you make those connections. Anyways, when Otaha brings this chocolate caramel to Akko and Masako, they both enjoy it, and Akko mentions that she has actually tried making it before. Now, Otaha is really shocked, and she says, but Kinoshita, who, by the way, is a well-known chef and is very skilled, says that it's a lot of work. Akko's like, yeah, it is, but it's actually not that bad. Now, this ties back to me for the theme, I think, in this book. And I keep mentioning that because I want to say that everyone can have their own interpretation. A lot of my thoughts and references are tied into what I think the theme is. And if you think differently, totally fine. But Akko mentions that she has made it before and it was so good. And it was during a more simple time where they weren't really specific. Now, what's really surprising is baking is a very specific science. If you guys have ever tried to bake before in contrast to cook, in cooking you can kind of be a little free-handed. You can kind of improvise a little. With baking, it is much more difficult because sometimes you need precise ratios in order for things to turn out a certain way. In that sense, Akko, in contrast to baking the form itself, says that, we kind of just added a little of this and a little of that. And she was able to make something she thought was so delicious that it made you want to fight for the last piece. Yes. Now, on the other hand, when she said that she tried to make it again, I guess like with more modern technology, it's a lot easier, she said. You had a lot more tools, you had a lot more, I guess like, I think her exact words, and I didn't write down quotes, because like I said, I didn't get a chance to reread it and like specifically reference a lot of things. But I do believe she mentioned something along the lines of like, because you have like the tools and things like that, it's a lot easier to make it. She said that it was good, but it wasn't as good that you would want to fight for the last piece. Now, I actually accidentally said that twice. She technically only says it once, but that is her point. On one hand, I want to argue that she's kind of making a reference is that when you are doing something kind of for the first time, you're not quite sure. And you know how like sometimes you make something and the first time turns out great and the second time it doesn't turn out quite well because you don't know what it was about the first time that made it successful. Kind of like that, but at the same time with Akko, it almost feels like she's talking about how like in a simpler time, things were better. But then now even though now you have a lot of help, you have a lot of things to make things easier, it's not quite the same as when you were before. Now, it's a combination of Akko being a little older and also the fact that she is specifically referencing baking, but I do think there was something there and I cannot, for the life of me, make any more connections because I honestly didn't give myself a chance. I could write an essay if I could. Okay, now I'm gonna look at chat. Sorry, I thought I could make a connection if I said out loud. Unfortunately, I couldn't. Darn it. But it was a nice full circle moment going back to Monday again with the curry. Yes, at the end when they do go back to the curry, then that's a third reference. I think it's a third reference to the curry. That's why I said that when you read from an author who is so intentional with their references, it's such a pleasure to like go through and slowly find these little like puzzle pieces and try to piece them together. But no worries. It was honestly, you guys should feel free to type in chat and communicate. I forgot to have marshmallows open. I'm gonna check marshmallows really quick. Shoot. My bad. I usually have marshmallows open, and the purpose of the marshmallows is for anyone who might want marshmallow questions. Who might want to participate but may not feel comfortable typing in chat. I wanted to give the option and I completely forgot. I got too excited to talk about this today. I do have a lot of thoughts I still haven't been able to mention. But yes, feel free to continue typing in chat. It is totally fine with me. I am doing my best to... Oh shoot, why did that change? No. Okay, there it is. No, why would I set up a fingerprint or a face authentication for marshmallows? No. It won't even let me press not now. Hello? No. Okay. Huh. Alright, I don't have... Okay. Okay, I don't have any comments, but if anyone wants to, you can use the marshmallows. So Marshmallows is a Japanese website where you can send messages anonymously. And then if you do see anything that is, I guess, unacceptable, the service automatically filters it out. But in general, it is a way for people to ask questions anonymously. And then people use it for like Q&As. Could be literal. It was mentioned that the older ladies worked at a time before computers, so they had to read and learn everything about the thousands of books where they worked. Yes, that is also very possible, which is why I said it's interesting to try to see if there's a connection, but I do think that there is something there. Whether it be like as deep as I want it to be, like, or it could just be directly mentioning, I guess, like, because the characters are older. a Q&A feature in YouTube, not fully anonymous. Oh, they do? Where is the question and answer? Oh, I do. There is a start a Q&A. Wow. Okay, I'll probably bring that up later. We'll try it out today. I've never used that. Thank you for bringing that up. I've actually never seen that. I don't want to steal anyone's fingerprints, and I don't want anyone to steal mine. But I totally forgot why we ended up on this topic. I think that's because I was talking about Kinoshita. Oh yeah, I was talking about the different foods from the different days of the week. The next one is rotating, which is Friday. So this is one of the few authors that actually has a rotating menu. They do mention that Anna Green Gables. They're like Kinoshita does mention that Anna Green Gables. The owner gave him a whole bunch of Anna Green Gables books, including multiple cookbooks. I do think it'd be fun to do cooking books, to go through a cooking book one day. But they mentioned they gave him a bunch of cooking books, and he decided to just end up on the simple bread, butter, and fresh cucumbers. I do wonder if he does rotate the menu, but they didn't mention it, and I don't know if it's just because I don't remember the reference or if he just specifically thought this was good. Even though it was tasty, it sounds tasty. But I thought it was interesting that he mentioned having so many Anna Green Gables books, but he doesn't have specifically a rotating menu like they do on Friday. They have Seiko Tanabe, who is a famous writer who does a lot of stories with interesting female protagonists. Now, I say interesting, and I want to double check something, because I did actually do some research into that one later. Was she? No. Okay, yeah, she just has interesting female characters. That's all I could get from it, because I was trying to read some of the summaries, and they were all pretty much, not all of them. There were, the books I could read were fiction, and they did have interesting female characters, but they were not the main character perspective, if that makes sense. It was always viewed by another character, usually a man, but there was an interesting female character that drove the story forward, if that makes sense. Anyways, they did things like okonomiyaki, Osaka-style oden, and the meal they ended up having in the book was the cooked sardines and the kenchinjima stew, which also sounded really good. Stew is always good. And then, of course, the last meal, which is yokomori, which I could not find anything about, unfortunately, with cooked sardines, rice, egg soup, and wakame. Now, it was very interesting to me that the meals were so simple, because technically when you have a chef, and I think it's a combination of the owner, who, it's kind of spoilery, we will dive into that a little later, but the owner, you can tell that she kind of has a more simple approach. So maybe she requested simple meals from Kinoshita, but it was interesting that the meals that were specifically eaten by Otaha there, and like specifically mentioned, I guess, like as part of the days that occurred in the narrative, were all really simple meals, including the last one, which was just canned food. You gotta try these foods one day. Honestly, if you do ever try them, please let me know. I'm sure they're tasty. For me, I would love to try variations of them, because a vegetarian, as a vegetarian, I would have to eat like alternative options, but it does sound really good, honestly. But yeah, those were all the meals they mentioned. Honestly, I feel like there was more there. There's more there, because one specifically is that there's an author who was known for making Kansai and Osaka more famous in literary circles. And I cannot remember if it was Seiko Tanabe or if it was another female author. And one of the dishes they do mention is okonomiyaki and Osaka-style oden. So again, like, you see the connections here. What am I trying to connect to? I don't know yet. Next. See, this is what I mentioned earlier. So, did you guys think that the author's structure helped or hindered the story? Now, there is a very interesting pace of the story. I think the pacing was done really well, in that you don't feel like there was too much or too little action. It was very comforting to read. But I do feel like the way that we entered into some of the POVs, it was not quite as smooth. So like the first POV we got, I think, for Manami done really well. I really enjoyed Manami and Masako's POV transition because it was tied directly into what was currently happening in the story. I feel like with some of the others, I get it, but Sasai and Tokai, the two male characters, their perspectives were a little, I won't say abrupt, but more so like they were not woven in as well. Not that they weren't woven in well, because they were still at a time where they had a relevance to the current actions of the narrative, but I felt a little unexpected, maybe. You were vegetarian for most of your life. There's some good veggie meats. Yes! Interesting to meet someone else who's been a vegetarian before. For me, I do like veggie meats once in a while, but admittedly, I'm entered a stage of vegetarianism where I tend to just eat. I don't. How do I say this? Nothing wrong with it. I do enjoy veggie meats, but I'm just like, it's not the focus of my meals, if that makes sense. So it's not like the focus of the things that I make. What else was I going to bring up? Because I had a point to this. I was going to ask. Shoot. Let me read through my thoughts really quickly. Well, if you guys would like to answer, you can. Oh, I personally thought Sasai's backstory was a little too long. So Sasai's backstory was at the very end of the story, and I do understand why. Because it turned out to be a huge plot twist that he was actually related to the owner of the night library. But I also feel like, unlike the other POVs, where it was more directly tied to the narrative, Sasai's backstory ended up being more like trying to explain and tie up all the loose ends, which made sense. I understand, because we were approaching the end of the story. And it made sense to give context, but I feel like it was not quite as interesting. I feel like Masako's POV was probably the best for me, because woven in and out of her flashback and like, how do I say this? Her actively doing a job. So like she would be flashback and then she'd be brought back to the present and then she'd be flashbacked. That was so interesting to me. And I kind of wish it had been done for Sasai, because it kind of, how do I say this? It felt a little long. Not because it wasn't important or interesting, but it's just like with how the pacing of the book had been up to that point, Sasai's perspective was a little long. So you enjoyed the different POVs, you got us to learn their backstories about them divulging their history to the characters. You learned a lot about Japanese mannerisms in this book. I agree. I think the different POVs, like I said, was a great tool for us to learn about the world. And I also think it was a great way to establish the characters so that we understood them and their motivations and their actions a lot better. I do think it was interesting. We never really got Ako's personality POV, but I think she had her own role to play. So personally for me, Masako's was great. Sasai's could have done the same thing Masako did, and I think it would have added to the ending and that kind of urgency. Now I'm going to move on to the next one. So I thought 15 questions would be too long, but like so far we're moving at a pretty good pace. I'm pretty happy with it. So we kind of talked about this earlier. Would you try any of the dishes mentioned in the story? If so, which one and why? So you had to pick one. Which one do you think you'd be most interested in trying? For me, if I was not considering my dietary restrictions, it would be the curry, because I really like a good curry, and I feel like the way that they described, especially Otaha described the curry, made it really interesting. It sounded really warm and inviting and a really comforting kind of meal, which is exactly what I love. So for me, it'd be the curry. You would have loved Ako's POV. You needed more chapters. Agreed. I feel like Maybe even just one more chapter would have tied the story up really nicely. But I do think the ending was intentional, and it did well. That iced coffee. Fair enough, fair enough. That was a valid dish mentioned in the book, and because it was from a very famous barista who was well known for his coffee, I can see why you'd want to try it. You love curries. Agreed. For me, I'm very much a Malaysian curry kind of person. I like that kind of profile. But I will say that although I'm not crazy about Japanese curry, I do enjoy it. I have seen a curry that is similar to the curry mentioned in the book, and it is also a corned beef curry, which is why I kind of had an image in my head about what the curry would be like. And it was done by a Japanese Western restaurant. So one of the characteristics of a Western restaurant in Japan is that they do make curries, but the curries are always a little different. And for this specific one, it was very interesting to see why they added the corned beef. And I'm not gonna lie, I was hungry. I was hungry. Dietary restrictions aside. I think another thing I really want to try is that chocolate caramel. So I do not really like sweets. I am 100%, if I could choose between savory and sweet snacks, I am almost always going to choose a savory snack. There are a couple of exceptions. I do love chocolate ice cream. I do love coffee ice cream. I do like ube ice cream. I feel like my exceptions are all ice cream. But I also had a period in my life where I really enjoyed chocolate caramel. There's a specific brand, I won't mention it, but there is a specific brand I liked. And until I got to the point where I was like, oh, everything's too sweet. It was a really really quick treat for me to have like just a piece and to let it melt in my mouth. So to hear about like this specific chocolate caramel brought me back to that period in my life where I really enjoyed chocolate caramel. Do you get the coffee ice cream story? I can probably tell it now. You like ube ice cream? Yeah, let me tell you. So there used to be an ice cream company. I'll talk about the coffee ice cream, but give me a sec. There used to be an ice cream company that made the best ube ice cream. And I grew up with it. I loved it. They unfortunately no longer exist, and I have since then never been able to find someone who is able to replicate that specific flavor of ube ice cream. It was not... The shade of purple was a cool tone purple. It was not the current warm tone purple, and that makes a very big difference in the flavor profile. And I miss it. I miss that ice cream every day, all day. It is the reason I try ube ice cream, and I'm constantly disappointed. Not because the ube ice cream isn't good, but because I'm still trying to chase after that childhood taste. Now, the coffee ice cream story isn't that interesting. I apologize if I've made you guys feel like it is a big thing. What basically happened was went to a family friend's house, and we were very young back then. And I think it was like very late because we were staying overnight, and for some reason as kids we were all awake. And we were very small at that age. I think we were like single digit age. And so the kids were like, oh, I'm hungry. And I was the oldest. So I went up and I was like, excuse me. And I called her auntie. I was like, we're hungry. Is there anything we can snack on? And she's like, oh, I don't have much, but I have ice cream. And I was like, oh, ice cream. And then she's like, oh, all I have is this. And it was a very specific brand of coffee ice cream. And she's like, is that okay? And looking back, I don't know why she gave us this coffee ice cream, because it was, number one, coffee. Number two, it was like midnight late. And number three, we were kids. So she gave us multiple spoons and she gave us the ice cream. I brought it back and we all slowly enjoyed the ice cream. Now, I can't go into detail about what happened after, but let me just tell you, the night was very long that night. But since then, I honestly really liked coffee ice cream. I do have like funny memories of it. But that's basically the coffee ice cream story. And I think I probably have some parts I'm missing because I was so young when this happened. But I do specifically remember that we stayed up late and the adults were like, huh, why aren't they sleepy? And I'm like, now I look back and I'm like, you gave us coffee and sugar. Yeah, so that was the coffee ice cream story. Apologies if it did not live up to the expectations, but yeah, she was nice. She was nice. But I will say that that specific brand of coffee ice cream is no good now. I tried it recently. They've changed the recipe. I don't care what they say on the ingredients list. I know they've changed it because it tastes different. I've had it for like pretty much most of my life. I know what it's supposed to taste like, and that is not what it tastes like anymore. Yeah, honestly, it could be because I just remember like we were crazy that night as kids. So there probably was more shenanigans I could have told you about, but I crashed. Clearly, I crashed and I wasn't able to remember. All right. Moving on to the next question. Now, what dish from other books would you want to try and why? Now, one of the things that I found I really love is actually books that talk about cooking. So, if you guys don't know, I love cooking animes and mangas. They range from things like, what is it? Cooking Vegetables or Vegetable Mix, which is an old shoujo about like a daughter of a pastry chef who wants to be a sushi chef and a son of a sushi chef who wants to be a pastry chef. What kind of Romeo and Juliet funness is that? I also love Cooking Princess. I really wanted to make the recipes in Cooking Princess. I have not been able to. And there are a lot of series that I'm currently reading where it's purely because I like the way they talk and write about food. I'm not a foodie, but I really enjoy seeing it because I think food is how do I say this? It's really tasty. Even if I may not want to actually eat everything, it's really tasty being able to consume it in this format. So for me, what dish would I want to try? I have two. I have two very specific dishes. So the first is the chocolate cake from Kiki's delivery service. So there is a cake that I believe Kiki receives, and it is a chocolate cake. It looks so good. And I did see that there's so many cafes that recreated and talk about it, but like somehow that cake, and I never love, it's kind of like, I guess a mirror glaze. And the reason it's called a mirror glaze is because it's kind of like shiny and reflective. And I guess it doesn't have to be a mirror glaze because mirror glazes have gelatin in it that's what makes it reflective. But it could also just be a shiny, well-tempered chocolate sauce. But I don't really know. I don't really know which one it is. I did order the book, the Kiki's Delivery original book. So I will be reading that and maybe I'll find my answer. But that one always looks really great. The second thing is, it's also from Kiki. It is actually the bread, because one of my favorite scenes from Kiki's delivery service is the scene of her sitting in the bakery surrounded by the bread and like grabbing the bread from the oven and like baking the bread, and it's so beautiful. It looks so fluffy and delicious, and as someone who grew up eating Hong Kong style sweet buns and things like that, I really love buns and things like that. They are always so tasty and they always remind me of my childhood. Speaking of manga, author was yeah, that's another thing. I did research into the authors that Otaha's favorite author, Takeshiro, had in their house. I did try to research that and I thought it was really interesting. I'll go a little more into that. I will also say there's another dish that I've always kind of like thought of that I wanted to try, and it is from Mixed Vegetables. And it's a dish where the daughter of a pastry chef starts working under the sushi chef. And his wife cooks a meal, and it's like a beef stew. And because she cooks a lot, they're trying to figure out how they're going to finish it. And because they're worried they're going to get bored of the flavor, the daughter of the pastry chef, she does have a name, I can't remember it right now. She thinks of a way by making this like cream roux, and I think it's like a cream roux, or it's like a cream sauce. And she mixes that into the stew to give it a different flavor profile and make it more appetizing so that they're not just eating the same thing all the time. And since then, I'm like, stew with cream? Because it was a very specific pastry technique they use. So it wasn't just like pouring cream into it. And since then, I've thought about that. Never been able to have it, but I thought about that. Oh, I see. So if you food during a banquet, those are always really tasty as well. Admittedly, I haven't read any of the Game of Thrones because it did not appeal to me, but I don't doubt that it was tasty. I didn't watch Harry Potter either, but I will say those banquet scenes also looked really good. The staging, really good. Hold on, I'm gonna sneeze. False alarm. But yeah. I see why the book was named Dinner at the Night Library though, because I do feel like those meals they had together were also really important. Really important. I can't say why, because I never got to slowly go into it. And by I don't mean like discussing it right now. I just meant like I wasn't able to sit down and write why I feel like it was important. But I see why it was named that way. Now, what drink or snack do you guys think pairs best with this book and why? Now, this is something that was actually brought up earlier, and if I could have polled these instead of having to do them one by one, probably would have been able to capitalize on that. My bad. But for me, I honestly think this is one of those things where you want a snack that kind of lingers on your tongue, if that makes sense. So something that you could kind of like slowly enjoy and have it melt on your tongue, like a candy or like a chocolate, something decadent, would pair really well with this book because it's one of those books you kind of don't want to put down, right? It's one of those books where you want to keep reading. So in order to like eat, and this is blasphemy to me, I never eat anything while I'm reading. I'm also the type to finish my popcorn before the movie starts because once I get focused on a movie, I don't want to eat popcorn. That's just a fact. So for me, I tend not to like snack while I'm focused on something. So if I had something like a chocolate and then could enjoy it while I was reading, that would be most ideal. Most ideal for me. I also think that's probably why the chocolate caramel stood out to me. Chocolate. Oh, you had some caffeinated chocolate while you were reading? Was it an enjoyable experience? Was it everything I dream of? But caffeinated chocolate is really interesting. I think the most I've had is a cappuccino flavored truffle. So is it like, did you have a truffle or is it like actual caffeinated? I don't know how to explain it. Was the coffee mixed into the chocolate? Nibbling a cookie and sipping on iced latte while reading the book. Great experience? Oh, that does sound amazing. I honestly wish I could be the type to like drink something while I read because I do. When I start reading a book, I don't stop. I get really sucked into it. So it'd probably be better if I could hydrate while I was reading. But that does sound amazing. What kind of cookie was it? Oh, no coffee, just caffeine? Interesting. Was it like an energy chocolate? For me, one of my favorite cookies right now is like an ube butter cookie. And I did get it from Costco, but it's really good. I will say it's more buttery than ube, unfortunately. I wish the ube flavor was stronger. And I do wish that, but it was still good. Like once in a while, I'll just have one, and it's probably my favorite cookie right now. No coffee, just caffeine. I read that again. My bad. I think I'm stuck on the fact that it's like an energy chocolate. Interesting. So it was an energy chocolate. Actually, did I? I didn't turn off DVR. Oh no. Okay, I hope that you guys are able to hear live. One of the things I've been trying to do with my streams is to make them live, and that way it just reduces the lag. But I realized I didn't turn that one on this time. Darn it. I mean, on one hand, people are able to like go back and like, I guess, rewatch. But on the other hand, I hope it's not buffering too much. Anyways, let's move on to the next question. You guys can still answer this question if you like. I'm just moving on so we have room. Now, do you guys think Mizuki Takashiro is dead? Now, Mizuki Takashiro is actually Otoha's favorite author, And the author, who in episode 3 reaches out, where their publisher reaches out to donate their book collection to the Night Library because the younger sister, presumably, of the late author wants to get rid of it all. So do you guys think they're really dead? And Otoha isn't able to shake off the fact that the author could be alive. Now, we do realize and we are introduced to the fact that Otoha is very emotional when it comes to this particular author. So there are quite a few people who try to gently and politely remind her to still be professional. And I think she does a good job, but at the same time, I think this is a very turning point in the book for her character. You've not read that far ahead. Yeah, that's okay. I apologize. There will be spoilers. But maybe you'll be interested enough. I won't be able to talk about everything. So if you still want to read it, I think there are lots of great details and moments that you can still enjoy even if I do spoil it. They also make caffeinated gum. Oh, wow, that sounds crazy. I've honestly never had energy anything because for me, caffeine's never been that effective, I guess. Until I realized that I was already kind of like dependent on my milk tea. I am sleepy when I don't have my milk tea, so what do I know? Otaha did well. I do think that Otaha wears her heart on her sleeve unexpectedly. When it comes to books, she wears her heart on her sleeve, but she did do well in this case. I do personally think that theoretically, and I say theoretically, Mizuki Takashiro is no longer here. And I do have my thoughts on that. I will expand on it in the next question. But I do think it is an interesting point. I do think it's an interesting point. Oh, by the way, if anyone's wondering, so the reason why it is presumed to be dead is because the publisher put out an obituary. So that's when you know, like, oh, this, how do I say it? It's not just news that's reported by an outlet. There was a legitimate obituary posted to declare that this author is dead. So I'm asking a theoretical question because I think it has a purpose in the narrative, but technically, for all purposes in the story world, this author is gone. So let me go to the next question so I can talk about that point. Now, if an author stops writing, does that count as death of an author? Now, Otaha I think she does discuss this with Sasai particularly, where Sasai tells her that if it helps her feel better, then she can imagine that her favorite author is still here. Because I think a lot of people, a lot of the workers, maybe they're trying not to dive too much into it. They have kind of just, and maybe because it's not their favorite author, but Otaha is very much of the opinion that it's not only hard for her to imagine her favorite author is no longer here, but there are notes when she went to the author's home to go pick up the books. She feels, and sorry for the spoilers, that the younger sister of Takeshiro Mizuki, who, by the way, is anonymous, genderless. Nothing is known about the author aside from the variety of books they publish in multiple genres, and is a very well-selling author as well. But Otaha believes that the younger sister could, in fact, be the author. And Sasai brings up a couple of interesting points. It could have been the younger sister's sibling. It could have been the younger sister's partner who was writing the books. Maybe it was a duel. And now that half of the duel isn't gone, they are no longer able to continue writing. Lots of theories, but there is something very specific where Otaha assigns herself to go pick up the books in the lavatory or the bathroom. Now, the interesting thing about this is now correct me if I'm wrong, lavatory is more specific and it refers sometimes to public washrooms as well. While bathrooms is a more, I guess, normal term and a more neutral term referencing the room in the house where you would shower and use the restroom and things like that. There are always a couple ways to refer to things, but the younger sister does specifically refer to the bathroom as the lavatory, and Otaha emphasizes this by mentioning it again, so I think there was significance there. I could not look up the connotation that often comes about when you use the lavatory, but I do think it's a reference to a public place, and it's often specifically to the toilet, if that makes sense, if I remember correctly. You're not sure? It kind of remained open-ended, but it might be the sister. Yes. They never really answered it for sure, but the reason Otaha is so certain is because when Otaha goes to the bathroom to see if there's books, because apparently there's books everywhere, the author comes in, and the author's sister, the younger sister, allegedly, goes into the bathroom with her and asks her, were you assigned to this room because you're a woman? And then she specifically starts mentioning how sometimes when they capture, I believe they specifically use the word terrorist, but that was the translation, that they have them clean the bathrooms as one of their community service punishments. And oftentimes these prisoners complain that it is inhumane to ask them to do this because in their culture, and I don't specifically know because this is a Japanese author, what they are referencing and what specific culture they're referencing, because let's be honest, a lot of cultures are misogynist. That their specific culture only assigns women to this duty, so they completely see it as an insult that they are being asked to clean bathrooms. And Otaha specifically remembers that this author, Mizuki Takashiro, had previously written a blog. Now, the blog was not an official blog, it was more like a personal blog. And once they started becoming famous, they did delete their blog, as, you know, a lot of people have been finding. Your social digital footprint is forever. Otaha remembers that Mizuki Takashiro had specifically made this exact same reference in her blog because she says that it is so ridiculous that something that some cultures see as demeaning is expected of and demanded of women. And I believe she's specifically referencing Japanese culture, although let's be honest, there are many cultures where this is expected to be, as is the expected role of the woman to do these things. Yeah, for cleaning. Yep. Not just that, but specifically cleaning the bathrooms. Now, I did look into the books that were in the bathroom, and if anyone's curious, they were mangas and paperbacks, which are very, very cheap books. And I see that. Manga is very expensive here in the West. In Japan, manga is often not that expensive. Now, especially, they're a little more expensive than for things like the Shonen Jump magazines, which are literally the cheapest paper because they're meant to be disposed. But the manga volumes there are much more accessible, and they specifically mention paperbacks, which, unfortunately, we don't have as many in the West anymore because publishers have found that people are willing to pay for special editions, and now they're going to take away the cheap versions of the book, which is really unfortunate because I thought it was a great way, an accessible way for people to enjoy a story. Anyways, we're not here to talk about the current state of the publishing world. I have complaints about that too. But they were pretty much a variety of authors. So there was One Piece, Demon Slayer, there was JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, there was Chibi Maruko-chan, there was Glass Mask, literally across many genres and full sets. They emphasized that it was full sets. Now, you could argue why, because some people do like bathroom reading. Personally, for me, I wouldn't read in the bathroom. I have done it before, but when Mama Ria pointed out to me that, like, it's kind of nasty, I was like, oh, you're right. And since then, like, I don't even bring my phone into the bathroom. I just can't. I can't. But I think, like, it says a lot that they brought in these very much more cheaper books. And also, I guess they're like light reading. That's how I explain it, because it's not that manga cannot have great plot. Glass Mask is very interesting. I really want to read it. But in general, I believe that the view of manga is more so that it's geared towards a younger audience. Not that it can't have depth or story or character or great themes. It is just that in general, in Japan, I believe the notion of manga and anime is that it is more so for younger audiences and audiences who still continue to enjoy it as they're older, which is why now some companies are looking to invest in more stories because they've realized that as these audiences grow up, they still want to read it. That is a more recent thing. This is just my understanding of the perception of manga in Japan. I'm being very careful. Like I said, digital footprint is forever. They do mention, and I'm in the same bathroom, by the way, behind the toilet, there is a glass partition, fair, and behind that is where you find like laundry machines, which is very common in Japan, I've found, to have the laundry machine as part of like the bathroom. And they also have storage. And in the storage cabinets, they specifically mention that they have the full sets of 2 authors. Oh, no. 1 full set and 1 half set. And this was such a specific reference. I wanted to find out more. But again, these authors were their references and websites were in Japanese, so I did not have time. The first one they find is Atsuko Suga. So these are hardbound box volumes in contrast to the paperback and more disposable nature of the mangas. And they were also in a cabinet, so they were kind of protected. Now, Atsuko Suga is very interesting because she was a very well-educated woman who also was, I believe, fluent and studied in Italy. So her works were a combination of Italian works she translated as well as personal works that she wrote. Her female characters were characters who lived their life. That is how I would describe it. But she had a specific 9 series hardcover volumes series, a 9 book series of hardcover volumes that was published after her death. And I think that's the series they're referencing in the story because they specifically say 9, right? So it's actually the writers, poets, and thinkers that basically inspired her or like influenced how she writes and how she kind of views the world. The different authors were Dante Alighieri. Apologies, I'm gonna butcher most of these. He's, I believe, Italian. Willa Cather, Natalie Ginsburg, who I believe was German. 2 volumes were dedicated to Elsa Morante. You have Charles Pagoi, Mary McCarthy, Simone Weil, and Davide Maria Turodo, which was really interesting. I really wanted to get to know most of these authors. I did not have time, but if anyone's interested, you should look into it. I think there's a very specific meaning and a reference to it. I feel like I'm kind of being a little crazy and being like, there's a code to everything, but there is a reason why authors, I like to think, specifically note specific details, and I like to find out why. The other one was Seiko Tanabe, who we already heard of. She's one of the meals that is inspired. Kinoshita has made meals inspired by. Now, they had 10 volumes in the bathroom, but it was not the full series, and it's Otaha who points out, oh, this isn't the full series. And the little sister's like, oh, is it? I wouldn't have known. But she's a little too nonchalant about it for someone who knows where like every single book in the house is. And that's another note that I thought was really interesting because some of these places, like the bookshelves are really obvious and they are like out in the open, just bookshelves on random places wherever you can put bookshelves. These specific 2 hardcover authors, they were in cabinets that Otaha wouldn't have opened because she wouldn't think that people would put books in there. But the younger sister knew. Now, if she could just be the younger sister and knew her sibling was eccentric, maybe her partner was eccentric, but it is interesting that she knew exactly where the books are, and when Ota was like, oh, I think there are more, she took her to another place where more books were hidden, and I didn't get a chance to write down what those books were. Yeah. But also, yeah, that's it. I forgot I had another point I was going to make. I'm going to move on to the next question. I had a point. So, one of the main conflicts in the book, and I say like this is kind of like in the synopsis and in like the preview, like the summary of the book that tries, the blurb, the book blurb that tries to get you to buy the book, they specifically mention that there is an incident that threatens the existence of the library itself. Now, what that incident is, for anyone who may not have read that far, is that someone leaves a book in the library. Now, you may think that's not a big deal, but remember, in the Light Library, they are hosting the collections of late authors. They not only spend a great deal of time categorizing everything, they stamp everything with a specific stamp, and they organize them by the author. So like when you go into specific places, like all the author's collections are in one place. So for them to have a book without a stamp left in the library, that could mean either A, someone stole a book, or B, someone, they did not stamp a book, like they missed a book in the collection and shelved it anyways. Or number 3, they didn't consider this, but it was an option. Someone just left their own book there. Yeah, they weren't stamped. It was a big deal. It was a big deal because it seems minor, but you have to remember again that the Night Library functions because of the owner, but it also functions because authors are willing to entrust their collections to the library. So this is a direct, I guess, question of the professionalism and kind of like the integrity of the library, because they do establish in the very first part of the book, they have like a mysterious system that will go off when the books are taken out of the library, right? Turns out that's not real. Sorry to disappoint. They don't have like a magical system, but what it is just like the notion that they might have the system to deter people who have the thought. So they don't actually have any security to alert them as to whether or not someone has taken a book out. But I do think it's very cute that Otaha really believed them, even though she thought it was odd because like as she was helping them categorize books, they didn't add anything like a magnetic strip or anything to the books. So there was technically no way for them to know if a book left, but she still believed it. And I do think it's very interesting that the beginning of Otaha's introduction to the Night Library is so magical. Because, like, for example, Sasai greets her and he's like, "Are you Anne?" in a very whimsical way. I think there's significance to that. There's also significance in Sasai going, "Open the door," and like being very playful in contrast to the very down-to-earth ending as Otaha kind of spends more time at the library. Like her beginning was so magical. And then by the end, it was very much grounding her honor system, pretty much. They have mentioned that they have had books stolen before, especially for more famous authors. So that is why they do have a cause for concern, and it is why they technically have a retired police detective on retain. Like he is technically hired and he works for the library, but he's not always there. He's more so on call, if that makes sense. Not Kitazato. What is his name? Kiowe-san. But I think that, what was I talking about? We were talking about the system, the honor system. Oh, so this is actually one of the core moments because this is where we're introduced to Masako, and I said the best POV switch, where you go back and forth between the current narrative of Ako and Masako, Otaha, and pretty much everyone all hands on deck, going through the books to see, number 1, are they missing any books that were categorized? Like the book in question was a Dazai Osamu book. So they were looking through their list of authors who had this specific book in their collection to see if any of them are missing. And then they went through and double checked if there are any books who were of a similar size to this book. Now, what they ended up doing was Otaha brings up the fact, and this kind of breaks Masako out of her flashback, where Otaha says, "Oh, but what if this is a book someone brought into the library?" And it is significant that it's Otaha who brings it up because, like she said, her name means leaf, right? She's bringing new change. She's also the youngest. So when she brings it up, Masako is actually really happy to have Otaha there. And she specifically mentions that it's really reassuring to have someone who's competent. And it is probably because of her own trauma, working in the library, being the most competent, if that makes sense. And I think for Masako, especially when we find out she has, I guess, she is, what is it? The older sister, the oldest daughter. Oh, oldest daughter. She's the oldest daughter. That's the term. So she has a brother, but she's one of those characters and one of those people who had all the responsibility as the oldest daughter, even when how do I say this? The oldest daughter implies that no matter how old she actually is, she is given a sense and a level of responsibility simply for being the oldest daughter. Now, Masako has taken care of her mom and her dad, and her story is a little sad, but she's also kind of had to prioritize everyone else around her except herself, and that's something that she feels very keenly. That's why I think it's significant when she brings up that Otaha is really dependable, because not only is Otaha really passionate about books, it's very obvious she's become very passionate about the library. So it's a great, great, great chapter. I really loved it. Yeah. I'm trying to remember where my thoughts were going with this, because I made a connection and I didn't want to reveal it too early, and now I broke my own train of thought. Oh, I was talking about the crime. So what happens is after Otaha suggests that maybe someone brought in the book, they went to the front ticket lady, which is Kitasato, and they asked her, hey, did anyone bring in this book? And technically they don't have rules against other people bringing in the book. They just have rules where people bring the book away. And what they do is they suggest, hold on, one of their security measures is that Kitasato does look inside the bags of people who come in. And there are certain places where people aren't allowed to bring their phone or their book. Their phone and their bags. So she does remember a specific customer bringing in this book, and she didn't think much of it because if it's their own book, she would have expected them to bring it away with them. But the book was apparently similar, so she didn't realize it. And they do say that the culprit is I forgot her name. Hold on, let me get her name so we can be accurate. Suspense, tension building. It is wait a second. I know I wrote down her name. Kiniko. I didn't write it down. Okay, it was the lady who was the lover of the late author. I cannot remember her name. If anyone else can remember her name, please let me know. But basically, this specific lady, she was I think she's a yearly pass member of the library. And she's constantly here reading from this section of her late quote-unquote lover. And it's never officially mentioned because technically he had a wife and he had kids. So they don't mention it specifically. But we find out that not only was it her, I think it was really interesting that they kind of discovered her motive. Because Sasai instantly, he has a moment where it's like you confirm his suspicions, but he wishes that it wasn't as he thought, if that makes sense. Like, he wishes it wouldn't have been her. Now, we don't really know why until we hear a bit about her story, and we do kind of get her perspective, which makes her a more important character to the narrative. Yeah, I agree. There were so many names. Like, I have them all written down, and I missed her somehow. But basically, at first she says, like, oh, it's just mine. I wanted to leave my books here too. And Sasai says they can't do that because obviously they can't just accept everyone's books. Everything is categorized for a reason. They stamp everything. They're being entrusted. It is their professionalism. And I don't remember if it's him or Otaha who specifically says, oh, but that's not the real reason, right? I think it's Sasai. And he says, as he presses her, she kind of begrudgingly admits, yeah, it's not because of that. Ninomiya? Yeah, it might be Ninomiya. Thank you, Double Red. But it turns out that the author that she had been with had left a letter, and it was a coded letter. And how it was, the code, you had to look for a specific book and a specific line to like decode the message. I didn't really understand the explanation of the code. I kind of had to read that a couple times and been like, okay, so you just need to use the code in the letter to figure out which book and which line or page would help you fully break the code in the letter. So apparently what happened was she found the book, she decoded the letter, and it turned out, hold on. Excuse me. It turned out that it was a letter he wrote to his other lover. So after his wife died, he took on another lover even though he was technically living with Miss Ninomiya. And she was furious, not only because he had another lover who was younger. By the way, if they can cheat with you, they can cheat on you. That is all I'm going to say. But basically, he used a book that Miss Ninomiya, had given him as the code to a letter that he wrote to his other younger lover. Scum. Very scummy. Very scummy. Yeah. And she was so angry, she took the book away because technically it was her book. She gave it to him. And she was really bitter about it. Understandably, but like I said. So she argues that she wasn't stealing because it was technically her book. So she was just grabbing her book and she exchanged it for another one of her books. Of course, they couldn't kind of just let that slide. And I will say they didn't report her or anything. But they did make a mention and ask her, like, she had technically figured this out a very long time ago. Very long time ago, apparently, because she spent so much time at the library. Sasai had no doubt that she had figured this out, like, a long time ago. So he asked her why she still kept coming in Otoha asked her why she still kept coming in if she had already known the answer. And her answer was really kind of sad. She says that the reason she kept coming in is because there's no other place for her. Now, for those of you who know, Miss Ninomiya does not have any family or relatives that are mentioned in the book. And clearly it seems like one of the few places where she could kind of be surrounded by people and like talk to people was the night library. So Sasai was really sad and Otoha was really sad at the realization that like Miss Ninomiya knew that once she was caught, she would kind of lose one of the few places she had left. But she still did it. And she kind of didn't regret it. But, you know, like, even the thought of losing one of the few places she felt like she could be in was not enough to deter her. And it was a kind of like a sad ending to the reveal. Now, I think at that point, I don't remember if they specifically mentioned her punishment, like if they said they revoked her membership, if they have banned her or anything. Maybe, like, they don't really go into specifics, but it is a very sad moment, especially because it is such a common problem, I suppose. Not just in Japan, but in a lot of places. I believe Denmark or Sweden. Don't quote me on this, but I believe one of the Scandinavian countries, they've introduced something called slow checkouts at some of the grocery stores. And what that does is there are people specifically there to have chats with the elderly while they are checking out their groceries. And it's meant to be a slow checkout line, so they really take their time to have conversations, and it's meant to be a great way for them to socialize. And I think it's a great method because it is very true. I will say that if you have hobbies, not only just when you're older, I think it's easier when you're older, but even for a lot of young people now, it's very easy to be lonely. And of course, there's a lot of reasons for that. But I hope you're able to find community where you can. And yeah, it's really sad. I think when you hear about these things, like, it was kind of a sad reveal. Like, if I say, were you satisfied with the reveal? I will say it was interesting because I kind of couldn't guess the culprit. I will say that because this is such a short book, it was a little difficult to figure out who the culprit could be because it could have been like a nameless NPC. Like, I just didn't know what direction the story was kind of going to go into. Because it's so cozy, I didn't imagine that it would be someone like a staff. That didn't make any sense. But it also arguably could have been a staff. For reasons that weren't expected, right? Like, maybe it was a book that got damaged and they forgot to replace it. Or maybe it was a book that someone defaced, you know? So, like, I figured there were reasons like that. So, in that sense, I think it was interesting. And I also feel like the fact that there was no resolution now makes me a little unsatisfied because I can't remember it. Maybe there was a resolution and I didn't remember it. But overall, I think it was interesting. I do think it was interesting because it does contrast with the owner of the library, who, by the way, is also someone who is older, but unlike Miss Nanomiya, who sought out interactions with other people, the owner chooses to be reclusive. It was an interesting contrast. I'm gonna see like how many questions I have because I kind of want to leave like the final ending review and things like that to the end. Okay. Oh shoot, that is the ending. Let me. All right, so I was like, oh, I want to see where we go with the ending. Let me see if there's. Okay. So let's talk about the ending. So the end of the story is that after the Miss Nanomiya incident, the owner of the library is apparently very upset and by the events that happened, and they have temporarily declared the library to be closed. Now, libraries do commonly close temporarily for like apparently counting inventory, and this is something that Masako and Ako mentioned because of their experience working in libraries. But for some reason, Sasai mentions that, like Otaha, he worries if the library will reopen because they don't say they're closing for a specific reason. They just said that they are going to close temporarily and they are sending all the employees on vacation. Now, this is very significant because you have to remember the library is a very idealistic place. I mentioned that it started out very dreamy and whimsical. And this is one of those moments where that's kind of challenged. Like, what happens when this place is no longer here? I want to argue that the library is kind of an idealistic place made by an idealistic person. And I say that not just because of the location, not just because of what it represents, which is like preserving, it's kind of like important, but not extremely important, but like preserving the collection of authors. Of course, very important for the fans, and I do think it's like of cultural importance, but it's not very important. And I'm not underplaying it, I'm just trying to state a fact. But the library is a very idealistic place. Now, that's probably in part to the owner. She kind of lives an idealistic life. Now, the owner is actually Miss Kobayashi, who is the cleaning lady. Hit up that one rude writer to donate more to keep it open. The thing is, we find out that Miss Kobayashi, the cleaning lady, she is extremely well off. Now, I will give you a brief summary of her story. Miss Kobayashi is Sasai's aunt. When Sasai was young, his parents died, and his grandparents went through a very fierce custody battle for him. But despite the fierce custody battle, they did not treat him very well. And they even, near the end of their life, I understand, but they sent him to a boarding school where he was in a very bad environment. Now, this is one of those boarding schools where people are not only very rough, but the teachers kind of overlook everything because everything's technically paid for. Sasai did have a trust fund left to him by his parents, and that's what I believe his grandparents used to send him to the school, and also why, like, it's very predatory, but why the school wants to keep him there. So when his aunt, Miss Kobayashi, finds out and she's finally able to get legal custody of him, the principal kind of doesn't want to let him go. But fortunately, Miss Kobayashi had used a very famous lawyer who helped her and, get the job done. Because clearly the principal was not going to let this person go and this tuition go without a fight. You're also bored in school. Well, this was a very crazy experience for Sasai because he basically grew up, I would say, neglected. It is very mentioned that he did not really have a good childhood. So when he got to his aunt pretty much let him go at his own pace. Again, idealistic. Because she doesn't expect him to go to school. She just tells him to read, to explore and travel the world with her. Because turns out Miss Kobayashi had previously met some. Okay, hold on. I gotta get this in order. I just made a connection. Miss Kobayashi used to study in Italy, which is why she really likes Seiko Tanabe, Atsuko Suga, who also studied in Italy. Anyways, that I just made the connection. So Kobayashi studied in Italy when she was younger. She's actually about, I believe, 10 or 12 years older than Sasai's mom. So she's like much older. And she also, when she was studying in Italy, she met a prince. They kind of have like a very meet cute, and like he's technically a prince in the sense that he is, I believe it's a UAE prince, kind of like an oil baron kind of prince who, I think it's implied. Yeah, they don't specifically mention, but I believe they mention he is from a very well-off country. And they have a very cute meet cute. But because number one, she looks young, and she specifically mentions because Japanese people look young for their age, and he proposes to her after they kind of get to know each other. Now she says no because she doesn't want to compromise, and he already has a fiance that was decided by his parents from when he was young, so she would have been the second wife. Now he's very sad, but his parents were objected to the marriage anyways, so what he did was he gave her a sum of money. And she didn't want to accept it, but he tells her to accept it because this is not a lot of money and it's pretty much all he can give her. Now, they kind of have an on-again, off-again relationship in the sense that, like, she goes to visit him, and I think he also visits her, but they don't really, like, get in a relationship, but it's implied that they are definitely very good friends. Now, every time he marries someone, because he adds another wife, he will give her a lump sum of money. And I think, like, when he proposes to her multiple times as well, but when he reaches, I think specifically 40, he does tell her, like, I do want to marry you, this is my last chance, and she still says no, because she really doesn't want to compromise or get mixed up with multiple wives and 8 children, and by that point, they had been really good friends, and he had taught her how to invest the money he had given her so that she could essentially fund eternal traveling lifestyle, which is people who are constantly traveling and don't really pay taxes. Allegedly. This is what's said in the book. I am not promoting this lifestyle. Yeah, he ends up with 4 wives, by the way. So it's kind of implied, and I don't know for sure if they truly end their relationship. Now, this is significant because number one, we find out that the library has no problem funded, and she also gets grants from the government because she's technically, like I said, preserving culture. But it is mentioned that once that after that fourth, society implies that after that 4th wife and that last proposal, they don't really meet each other anymore. Now, you're probably wondering, what is the significance of this? Well, the night library opens at night, right? So it has very specific hours. The reason it's called the night library, it's only open from, I believe, 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. Don't quote me on that. I remember it's only open at night and everyone sleeps during the day. Now, why does she specifically choose those hours? She says it's because sunlight can damage books. In reality, it's because she said, hold on. Excuse me. She says that because this specific person contacts her at night, she would stay up anyways. That's why she puts it, she set the hours at night. Now, why did she open a library dedicated to preserving authors? Oh, by the way, I didn't give Sasai and the Kobayashi's entire life story. There is more to their relationship, and it's very interesting, but we don't really have time. Let me finish this first. So the reason why she is opening a library dedicated to preserving authors' collections is this particular man, the one who gave her the money, he wrote a lot of papers in his normal name, but he wrote one novel that he published in the UK, I believe, under a pen name. And this story was a love story. And this is a book that she personally makes sure to keep in the library. And he has also entrusted his entire collection of books to a specific Japanese library, because he cannot just give her, I guess he can't include Kobayashi in his will due to, legal complications. So this is his way of, I guess, keeping a piece of him with her. And it's very interesting because they entirely bonded over books. It's why they connected in the first place. So her entire reason and purpose for this library is because of her affection for this man. And it's very interesting because Miss Ninomiya also continues to come to the library originally, for the affection she had for her partner, but it kind of twisted, right? Once she found out the truth. And Miss Kobayashi says, one of the reasons she avoids people is that people's raw emotions exhaust her to the point where even talking to someone, interviewing some of the workers for their jobs, will have her lying in bed for multiple days in order to recover. I think it's interesting and it can be discussed upon, but I will refrain from doing so because I don't have enough context for it. But basically, Miss Kobayashi had to face her own feelings when she heard about Miss Ninomiya's incident. I also think that for Miss Kobayashi, this library is so significant to her because it's supposed to represent her affection for this specific man. Now, the reason I think that is one of the things that Otaha mentions at the beginning at the novel is a specific moth that is preserved and on display. It's called the Koko Kobayashi moth. It does not exist. I looked it up. But it was apparently named after Miss Kobayashi because said oil baron man was someone who invested a lot of insect research, and he got to name a couple species, and he named a specific blue-winged azure-ringed moth after Miss Kobayashi. I think there's a couple reasons for that. In Japanese culture, I looked this up superficially, apologies, I don't have references, but moths are usually seen as symbols of life and death. So sometimes they're seen as the bringer of souls, sometimes they're seen as, hold on, I wrote it down. They have a lot of meaning. Where did I write it down? Shoot, I wanted to make sure I clarified, but those are just what I remember. Where'd it go? Shoot. It must have been in my other notes. I have a draft note, and then I have a note I wrote more neatly to be able to read, and unfortunately, I can't find it. But moths are supposed to represent, life and death, as well as, bringers of soul, and they have, a very spiritual meaning. That's kind of why I kept emphasizing that the library is a very idealistic place, because it is built by someone's ideals. Now, this specific moth she keeps at the entrance is something Otaha notices as soon as she enters the library. Now, she thought it was a butterfly, but upon closer inspection, it was a moth. Now, this is kind of important because don't forget, when Miss Kobayashi met this specific man, he thought she was a young woman. And it turns out she was older than him, not by a lot, but it was kind of the unexpected nature. Upon closer inspection, it's not as it seems. That's a lot of her relationship with this man as well, because remember, they don't have an open relationship. By that, I mean they don't have an official relationship. They are someone who, if you look a little deeper into it, you'll realize that they are connected. But Otaha uses this moth to figure out and make the connection when she finds out that the moth is called Koko Kobayashi, that it is Miss Kobayashi, the cleaning lady who never talks to anyone. Now, this is also significant because at the end, when Otaha's contemplating if the library will reopen, she finds Miss Kobayashi cleaning the bathroom. Now, remember, Mizuki Takeshiro mentions that it is kind of ridiculous how it is expected of women to be expected to take on this duty, but Miss Kobayashi voluntarily takes on this duty. Now, I'm not saying that Miss Kobayashi shares the same values as Mizuki Takeshiro, but I think for Miss Kobayashi, remember, she's very affluent. She has wealth. She has a lot of experience. She's traveled the world. But for her to voluntarily clean the bathrooms, and she does do it with intention because apparently being a cleaning lady allows her to like see everyone from a different perspective, not just from the owner. And she does also have a habit where like because she she tries to see people for as they are, she believes that like looking at people's books are a way for her to get to know someone's true self. So she likes to go into like the employees' rooms and look at their collections, which is a violation of as a landlord. But anyways, she's voluntarily cleaning, and I think it's because this library holds such significance to her because it's not just a library, it's not just a place. It is the place that connects her and her beloved together. Because don't forget, she has his book. He's not gone yet. He's still here. But she has his book in the library. And I think she's still in contact with him, kind of. I don't really know for sure because there's a lot unsaid. But when Otaha finds Miss Kobayashi, she's cleaning the toilet. So Otaha, her first thought is, why did I never offer to help before? And she goes to offer help to Miss Kobayashi, who, remember, she doesn't really talk. She only communicates with Sasai, and even though she sometimes interviews people for like through Skype, she doesn't really talk because she finds that people exhaust her. My theory is kind of like, truthfully, she doesn't really want to face her own emotions, so facing other people's emotions is very difficult for her because it forces her to have to face her own emotions that she's trying to run from. Now, when Otaha offers to help her clean, she says, Miss Kobayashi doesn't really say anything, and then she says no. But then Otaha picks up, I think, a cleaning brush and starts cleaning anyways. Which, Otaha, you should not be cleaning anything with your bare hands. But we're not here to discuss that. But please, anyone who's listening, do not clean the toilet with your bare hands. Please wear gloves. Some cleaning products are especially harsh, but also it's gross. Anyways, Otaha starts cleaning with her, and she asks her not to close the library. Now, Miss Kobayashi is like, oh, what are you talking about? And Otaha admits that she tells her that she knows it's her, and she knows that she's Miss Kobayashi, the owner, and that she begs her not to close the library because it's a special place to everyone. And Miss Kobayashi she snaps a little bit because in most of Sasai's views, even though Miss Kobayashi has always been fairly strong and independent, like don't forget, world traveling person who, by the way, she does adore Sasai, and he's one of the few exceptions that she will compromise for. I'll bring this up again later. But Miss Kobayashi basically tells her, like, who are you to tell me what to do? And Otaha, I don't remember. Let me get her specific line for you. Her specific line is... Oh, okay. She says, this place is so precious to me, please don't close it down. And then Miss Kobayashi, by the way, she tells Sasai that she hires people with specific secrets because it's easier to control people. And I do think that, yes, I can argue that that seems to be the ruthlessness that she seems to have. But I do think another part of her is because some people like to have something to hold over other people because they're afraid of being betrayed. I do think that she thinks that people won't do or won't, how do I say this? People won't behave unless there's something she's holding over their head. Now, we could go into why this is. We don't really know because this is a short story. But it turns out that the reason Otaha lost her job at the beginning of the story from the bookstore is that there was missing money from the cash register when Otaha was there. And this was a significant sum. I believe it was like $500. So she was accused. And Otaha believes she knows who actually took it, but she did not dare speak up because number one, she didn't have proof. Number two, she was like, oh, this person has a family, and if I accuse him falsely, it would be really bad, not just for him, but for his family who he's supporting. Now, again, Otaha's a little naive in this regard because I'm not going to say she's wrong. Everyone has their own values. Number one, they do have video cam footage, and clearly in the video cam footage, Otaha was not stealing. Number two is this is the same manager who sexually harassed her, and not, I guess it wasn't like severely, but he did often bother her, and who often tried to make her life difficult simply because she... Was it that she was not... Was that Manami? Where she was not cheerful enough, or like Otaha didn't really act the way he wanted her to? Something like that. Anyways, Miss Kobayashi starts like kind of blackmailing Otaha, but I was like, should I tell your parents? Sasai, which by the way are three people who kind of have significance to Otaha, but much like Miss Kobayashi is not very, tries to retain her emotions in check, Otaha also really keeps her emotions guarded in regard to these three people. Like, she's seen to be very open with the others, but she's much more reserved with both her parents and Mr. Sasai. Wasn't good working conditions, you didn't like, yeah. He was a terrible manager. People don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And sometimes they leave jobs. That's not true. Sometimes people leave jobs, but most people leave bad managers. Anyways, Otaha knew that Otaha tells Miss Kobayashi that she can go ahead, but she begs her, please keep this library open. And she said, there are some who have nowhere else to go if this place is no more, and I won't tell anybody you're the owner. So Miss Kobayashi says, you don't need to say that. She says, I won't do anything to cause trouble for all of you. I'm responsible for all of you to work here. If I say I'll take responsibility, I will. And that's when Otaha walks away. Now, at this point, Otaha is like in pure tears, and she's like trembling because I think for her, she knows that's not a real answer. That's not a guarantee. It's kind of rough, but Otaha's character is that before coming to this night library, she had never fit in. A lot of her character is she doesn't really... It's not that she doesn't recognize other people's cues, but she's never been able to quite fit in with other people. And she's learned certain things as like automatic responses. But in general, she's learned that there is always underlying messages that she's always struggled to figure out. And that's why at first, when she was dealing with Ako and Masako, she often questioned and doubted if she understood what they were asking or if they meant something different and they're only saying this to be polite. And it wasn't until like now in the story where Otaha feels really comfortable opening up to the people here, and she recognizes that she doesn't have to overthink. And that's why this library is like so precious to her in part. But she also just finds like she really values the library itself. I'm trying to remember. There was one scene. Hold on. Let's see. And don't butt in when you... Okay. Oh, she doesn't say what I thought she did. She just says, don't butt in when you shouldn't say anything. I thought she said something else. I thought she told Otaha that, how dare you try to get me to... I can't remember what I thought she said. But basically, when Otaha goes back to the dining hall because everyone was eating their last meal, and I don't say last meal as in like the library's closed. last meal, as in the last meal mentioned in the story, she meets her eyes with Sasai as he's talking with someone else. And even though he looks like he's gonna go ask her what's wrong, because remember, she's crying, her cheeks are red, she is trembling, he ends up just talking to Tokuda. So Otaha sits next to Manami, and Manami says, what happened? And Manami's really calm, by the way. Like, she just saw Otaha come back from the bathroom, eyes red, trembling, upset, and she's like, what's happened? And she's just like, where'd you go? You were gone a long time. The very last line of the book is, maybe the fact that it's not forever is exactly what makes it all the more beautiful. Because, like I said, Otaha completely doesn't believe that she's convinced Miss Kobayashi that she will keep the library open. Because Otaha doesn't really have confidence in herself. I was trying to bring up the fact that she's really struggled in social settings, but she also just really lacks confidence in herself. And that's why when she has tried to bring up things like regarding her favorite author, she doesn't want to bring it up because she's worried that if she says it wrong, then that will affect whether or not it is true or like if it comes true later. It's something I really relate to because sometimes you have a thought, but you worry that if you don't convey that thought properly, it will either be misinterpreted or it will cause other people to misinterpret it. And then you've kind of like caused them to think that way or led them to think that way. And I think it's also just Otaha's lack of self-confidence because of her experiences and also because she still feels like she's not quite an adult yet, even though she's independent, even though she has her own job, she has her own place to live, she has her own values, but she kind of feels like she's not quite an adult. Ever go to the bathroom to cry? I've gone to other spaces, but not the bathroom. It's a very Japanese mindset, kind of. Like, there is so much nuance, especially in, I would say, East Asian culture, where you have to understand the intent of why people are saying it rather than just the words they're saying. You have to be able to read their intent and what they're trying to convey. Now, Otaha's lack of confidence also stems from her parents. And her parents in particular, they are disappointed in her. So we know why Otaha got fired now, right? Well, when Otaha goes home to her parents, she actually doesn't tell them why she got fired. They only know that she quit because she was asked to take responsibility for the incident. So to her parents, she quit. Her mom is disappointed but asks her to look for another job. And her dad says there's no point when you won't stick around for even... there's no point when you won't even stick it out for 3 years. Again, it's a very Asian mindset where her father is expecting her to hold out. But Otaha's very bitter in her mind as she says, even though this person is sexually harassing me, even though it was such a terrible environment, it made me want to quit. And she's wondering why she has to tough it out or why she has to compromise. Now, her dad walks away, but she's telling her mom about this new job, which is a night library. Remember, night library is in the mountains, weird hours. The pay is better than part-time pay, but it's still not like a great pay. And her mom thinks she's being, she's essentially either doing an unsavory job or she's going to be kidnapped. Which, I understand, reasonable. But she also it's very apparent she kind of just doesn't trust Otaha. So later on, there is a moment where Otaha's childhood friend comes to visit her. Now, her childhood friend is a typical adult. She has a good job, she has her own place, she works in the city. And she actually tells Otaha that her mom is going around crying, telling people that Otaha is doing something unsavory. Because what else could she be doing? She doesn't believe there's actually a library in the mountains. Otaha shows her friend, and her friend's like, wow, I legit also thought that you were, being kidnapped or something. Because it was kind of sketchy. Admittedly, the whole process is you get an email from the owner, and then if you want, you schedule an interview, which is by Skype, and then they ask you to show up in the mountains at the library. So all the workings of something sketchy, which is why if there was ever a job like the night library, I 100% would not do it because I would never be able to put my trust into this process. But the fact that everyone else was able to shows a sense of whimsy, you know? A real sense of naivety and whimsy, I will admit. Anyways, one of the things that Otaha's friend advises her is to just bring her parents to the library. Let them see with their own eyes, and then that will reassure them. Because right now they are truly concerned about Otaha and her future. And Otaha kind of rejects this. Otaha gets this advice actually not just from her friend who is the same age. She gets this from Ako and Masako, who share the same answer, I guess, where they also advise her, hey, bring your parents. I'm sure that they're worried and they'll be assured once they see you. You can bring them to the library. And they even give her specific advice that she can borrow the library key and let them walk around and see for themselves that it's a real functioning library certified by the government. I agree. Something magical from how whimsical the start was. I agree. But I think to Otaha, this is a magical place, and that's why she doesn't want to bring her parents here. Because I think to her, her parents represent the reality she doesn't want to follow. The library is everything she wants in a very idealistic environment, and I think she worries that by bringing her parents there, it will bring a sense of reality that she doesn't want to face. I think a lot of the characters in this book are actually not wanting to face reality, except for Manami, who is very realistic, and that's why she's trying to leave the library, because Manami at the end reveals that she is actually interviewing, and she may not return to the library once it reopens. So I think that there's something to explore there as a theme. The email did send GPS location, so it is a modern thing. Could just look at reviews. Yeah, they could have done that too. But one thing I didn't look up with this book, let me check really quickly when this book was written. Let's take a quick look. Book was first published in Japan in 2023. Okay, so it's a very recent book. It's a very recent book. You see, there are lots of modern solutions, but I do think it's interesting that Otaha's friend, who is representing everything that you kind of expect from a young adult, to give the same advice as Masako and Ako, who are full-fledged adults who've lived a full life. In that sense, I think Otaha and Kobayashi and some of the other people in this book, even Masako and Ako, they all show a sense of naivety. And that's probably why they're so attached to the library. Because even though Manami enjoys her work here, she keeps feeling like an imposter surrounded by everyone. And that's why she's trying to leave. Yeah, it does? Okay, I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember. My brain was like Italian author. Oh my gosh, specific references. And that's all I went to. I think they did mention blogs and social media. I just didn't specifically remember which ones. But for me, let me see what the next question is. But yeah, I'm not sure if the library will be open. They really do leave it on an unexpected note because it is on the whims of Kobayashi and if she wants to reopen the library. Now, were you satisfied with the ending or do you think it needs a sequel? I think most of my chat has answered that, but I think most of you have said you would want more chapters. Because you mentioned Hurt Your Soul. Yeah, I have switched search engines because the G engine has specifically mentioned they will use AI answers for all of their searching. So, screw them. I changed my search engine for the first time in a long time, even on my phone. Went through all the trouble. And now it is significantly realizing how dependent I was on that G system. But at the same time, it's nice not to have to deal with hallucinated nonsense. Manami wasn't really into books like the others, so I'm sure that's why she thinks that way. Also true, because Manami has lived most of her life based on the expectations of others. Now, something significant about each of the characters is that they've all kind of pursued life in their own means. Like, they pursued their own view of life. Ako and Masako are fairly unexpected for Japanese culture in that they were fairly independent women. Ako did marry and have a child, but she did raise her daughter herself instead of remarrying. Masako never married, although she did have what ifs. Kind of for me, it wasn't romantic what ifs, it was just like, did I miss out what ifs kind of thing. You also have Tokai, who is an unexpected career opening used books, and he got there in an unconventional way. Sasai pursued unique kind of lifestyle indirectly through his aunt, but then later on he chose to devote himself to the library and his aunt. That is important because one of the themes of this book that I think is why Sasai is kind of interesting. Otaha, even though everyone keeps telling her to just kind of get a normal job, she wants to get a job surrounding herself with books, doing what she loves. Her parents kind of want her to settle down, like go for the civil service exam, maybe get married. And she says, I can only live my own, I think it's like, I'm only young once, or I only live my own life. Please allow me to pursue what I love. So everyone else has kind of pursued their own, I guess, like they pursued what they wanted in life. But Manami, everything she has mentioned in her backstory is like, everyone tells her, wow, Manami, you love books. You should pursue a career in this. And then Manami goes to do that thing. Going to the night library was kind of like the first time that Manami kind of did something for herself that wasn't kind of told her, dictated by others. And I think that kind of scares her. She kind of feels like she doesn't fit in, but it's also the first time where she's not doing something because she was kind of told to, but instead it's something that she tried to pursue for herself. I mean, she did have practical reasons because she's like, oh, I'm pretty good at what I do. And like, the pay is better than what I'm doing right now. I don't really see a future in what I'm doing right now. So it's very realistic and valid. But like I said, everyone else is living contrary to kind of the expected, I guess, expectations for them. And Manami kind of wants to live within people's expectations. And I also think that's kind of why she like doesn't really know how to deal with Otaha. She is warm-hearted, but Manami doesn't really like confronting emotions. And that's why I think when Otaha came back to the party or the meal, kind of crying and blotchy, and Manami was like, oh, where's you been? That's it. She wasn't like, oh, what happened? Are you okay? She's just like sipping her beer as she's like talking to Otaha, all casual. You'd be happy if a sequel reminds you of an older slice of life anime where each episode has a plot and doesn't really focus on a long main plot. Could push the ending a bit back more and add more chapters. That sounds amazing. I really like episodic things like that, and I agree, because I feel like for a place called the Night Library, I think there was more that could have been explored. We kind of got two small plots. One with the author who came demanding to read someone's collection, and another author who donated their collection. And then we got someone potentially stealing a book from the collection. I feel like there could be more incidences that build up in the Night Library, and it would be great as an episodic series, because the concept of the Night Library is so whimsical and unique in and of itself. I feel like there are definitely things that could be explored. Like they mentioned, graduate students come in and ask specific questions when they do research. Manami was really upset with that, but I feel like it would have been interesting to dive into that. You could have also talked about how the library is trying to introduce younger people, to books. Some people can't hold their alcohol well, so crying wouldn't be too odd if she was drinking. Also true. You know what? Very true. Like I said, Manami is very realistic. I feel like everyone else is a little more emotional, but Manami in particular is more so following typical social conventions. And the reason I say that is because I think one of the things in Japanese culture is not speaking the unspoken out loud, because you worry about bringing down the atmosphere. I don't know if that applies in this sense, But it could be that Manami is not like ignoring Otaha because she doesn't like her, but it could just be because she thinks the socially acceptable thing to do is to not press Otaha unless she chooses to speak out about the incident herself. But she's still asking what happened. Like I said, she's very warm. Yeah. Ultimately, I wish that we had gotten more of the story because it was so interesting. I love the concept, and I definitely would want to read more about this universe. Like I said, we could get another book with perspectives on Kyoe, on Kinoshita, on Akko, on some of the other characters that we kind of didn't get to explore, you know? Maybe Kitazato has a secret connection. Oh, by the way, Kyoe and the lawyer who helped Kobayashi are hired by the oil baron prince. That's how I'll explain it. So, like, a lot of, I guess a lot of his presence is in this library. Okay, next question. Is there anything I haven't mentioned that you want to talk about? Because admittedly, I still have things I want to talk about. I want to talk about what I think is the main theme of the book. But if there's anything you guys want to talk about, please feel free to bring it up now. This is not your last chance, but this is one of those opportunities where I am curious. I'm gonna hydrate while I wait. Oof. All right, I said that 15 wasn't too long, and I don't think 15 was too many questions, but we have gone on quite a bit, so I hope I can still wrap this up pretty neatly. Because we did start a little later. Normally I like to do book club a little earlier because that gives us more time, but technically we did start at 9:30, which is the typical time for book club. Or typical time for my streams. Next time I definitely for sure have to start earlier. As a reader and a writer, would I give my... Never. Never. Once I disappear, I will... there's a way that you can, like, orphan your works. That's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. My AO3 history and books writing will be forever between me and the AO3 servers. Although there is a abnormally large amount of people publishing fanfic, and abnormally large, ridiculous amount of publishers who are for some reason advertising it as fanfic, which is really, really concerning as a fanfic reader and writer, because we are in a morally gray area with fanfic because you don't profit off of it. And there are people actively promoting things as fanfic. Big companies. It's so... It's also kind of lazy, I'm not gonna lie. Some books work well because you already have an understanding of the characters and their backstory and their history, so there's a lot that doesn't need to be explored. The POVs in this book are so good because you get a sense of the world building. You don't need that with fanfic, so once you change the names of the characters, people aren't gonna know because you subconsciously, when you write fanfic, don't elaborate on backstory so people don't understand the motivation or why things are certain, why characters act the way they do. It doesn't make any sense. I'm also very annoyed because it's so lazy. It's so lazy. And on the publisher, not on the fanfic writer, on the publisher side, how do I say this? No, this is not the time for that. This is not the rant for that. You thought the chapter with Tamurata was touching. He thought that his rival and friend didn't include his stuff, but he included all his work. You excuse his earlier rudeness since he asked for forgiveness. That is very fair. So that was actually one of the first incidences that happened in the book where there's an author who comes in demanding to read another author's collection. Now, because this is a very influential author, and he agrees that if they show him his collection, he will make a donation to the library and also donate his collection. So they know that that's really good for the longevity of the night library. Because even though the night library can infinitely occur, because of Kobayashi's own assets. What draws people to the library is when notable authors donate their collections. So this author, his purpose was that he had a specific friend who was not as successful as him, and he always worried the specific friend looked down on him. So he wanted to see if this author had his books, because he did send him his books. Unfortunately, he never reached out and communicated with his friend until his friend died, confirmed that, in fact, not only did his friend have the books that he sent him, he had every single book he ever published, and this was a very successful author who wrote a lot of books. He ended up crying and being very emotional. He's like, why did I wait? Why did I not communicate? I also think that this was a very important trigger for Otaha because, let me just say, it's very childish of the author, but I feel like a lot of the actions taken by people in this night library are very childish. But Otaha actually speaks up, and we often mention that, I think we joke on this channel that something about being an adult means that you no longer communicate. But Otaha, when she later opens up to Kobayashi, that is a very significant moment because remember, Kobayashi doesn't like to talk or communicate. And Otaha is also someone who usually does not like to say too much because she's worried she's going to say the wrong thing. And it's really only about books that she gets passionate. So she kind of takes that leap to open up and ask Kobayashi not to close the night library. I do think that's in part because of this incident. Like, Tamura makes a really big deal about how he was so regretful of all the time he lost of his friend, who was actually probably always his friend, but because he never wanted to reach out, he was too prideful, he was making too many assumptions, that he only now found out, but too late to actually reconcile with his friend. So I do think there are a couple of incidences here about regrets, a couple incidences about being too late and not trying sooner, which I think really influenced Otaha towards the end, which is why Otaha becomes more grounded, but she also grows up a little. So it was really great to see. Now I want to give you guys a few moments if there's anything else you want to talk about, because I know it takes a while to type. Also, there might be a delay on your end and my end. But for me, the last thing I'll probably mention is the main themes. I wonder, because I think that's one of the most interesting things for me about this book. I kind of tried to hint at it up till now. Oh, there's two. Let me mention one of them now. So Anna Green Gables is constantly referenced. And as I said, one of the first things Sasai says to Otaha is, "Are you my Anne?" Or are you Anne? Not my Anne. No. And then there's later so many mentions of Anna Green Gables, from the meals to Masako Ako and Otaha and them watching the movie. And then Otaha specifically references that, like, Sasai feels like a confidant to her. Now, yes, you can say that. It reminds me to actually make that communication, because it's better to not live with regrets and try anyway. It's a good lesson. Very true. It definitely is. I think, like, when you are scared of speaking up, you kind of worry you look silly, right? But then I think looking silly is better than wondering if things would have been different if you had spoken up, you know? So, like, I agree. It's a very good lesson. I look deeply into things. But I think it's a great message, even just as it is. And I'm not saying, how do I say this? I feel like this book is full of great lessons, and that is definitely one of them. Sorry, because I was still thinking of the Anna Green Gables thing. Let me finish my thoughts on that. Because I found out the story of Anna Green Gables is a young girl is accidentally adopted by an older couple, or older siblings. A pair of siblings who are getting in on age. Matthew and I think Lillian. So although they weren't sure, Lillian was not sure about Anne at first, she warms up to her, and Anne is later the one who, when Matthew passes away, she's the one who comes back, gives up her college in order to come back and take care of Lillian and help her run the farm. Matthew is like kind of affectionate and enamored, not in like a romantic way, but like in a familiar family way with Anne as soon as they meet. And he's like constantly doting on her. So with Otaha, when she meets Sasai, he's kind of unexpectedly soft with her, right? Because they mentioned like everyone's surprised when they find he's whimsical. He was excited when he first met her, and Otaha actually wanted to talk to him more about books, but because she's so used to people not wanting to talk about it with her, that when he first mentioned like, "Are you Anne?" she subconsciously reverts to her "I'm gonna fit in with society" habit and been like, "Excuse me?" instead of excitedly talking with him. And you kind of notice that like throughout the story, Sasai is fairly soft on Otaha, whether it's asking her to like fall asleep in the car or trying to be considerate and comforting her when she's feeling unsure. I don't know how to describe their relationship because it doesn't feel romantic. But it is kind of implied that Otaha does sense a connection with him because at the end of the book, one of the things that Otaha resolves to do is that she wants to make sure that she goes to talk to Sasai. She wants to get to know him better. So for me, it's kind of, I guess I'm trying to remember because it's so late at night. In this sense, Otaha is to Anne as Matthew is to Sasai. Now, it's not an exact one-to-one, like I said. You could kind of interpret Otaha and Sasai's relationship as a little romantic, or it could be, depending on their age gap, because I don't think we ever find out how old Sasai is really. It could be that they just have like this family-like affection, platonic affection for each other also as well. But there is a significance in Sasai being the first person who meets Otaha, besides her aunt, but like in the book. He's the first person to meet her, and he is also the person who then does not reach out to Otaha when she's crying. Remember we said like the Tamura was saying it's regretful that he didn't reach out. Would Sasai regret not taking that moment to talk to Otaha, or does he potentially talk to her after? We don't know. I would have loved to explore that. Also, something important about Anne of Green Gables is that Anne does compromise and give up her college in order to go back home and teach, but she kind of does so with a positive outlook because she believes that things will get better. You firmly believe that he just has a caring personality. It is also mentioned he does, but the reason I think it's interesting is because so many times when Otaha brings up what Sasai does for her, a lot of characters are surprised because he doesn't have that personality. And Sasai also mentions that other people tell him he's just not very emotional, I think. Like, he's surprised when Otaha says that he's very considerate and caring. And he's a little surprised because he says other people have never told him that. So he could just be very caring and like a quietly caring person. But because he's mentioned it multiple times and other characters have mentioned it, I have my conjecture. Also, yeah, the reason I bring up that is because do you guys remember when Otaha was introducing herself and she said that everyone asked her what her mom's favorite story of the author, who she is named after, and I think it's hold on. Otaha Higuchi, and she's named after another author, Iroha Iguchi or something. Well, I looked up her story called The 13th Night, and let me summarize it for you. This is the one story I was able to find out what it's about. So in the story, there is a character called Ozuki. Now, Ozuki is going home to her family home. This is set in an older time. And as she gets home, she can hear outside her house how her dad is talking about how it's so wonderful how Ozuki has married a man who is successful because he has sponsored her younger brother to go to a good school, and now her younger brother can get an education. Clearly, we know Ozuki's family is not well off. Now, when Ozuki goes inside the house, her parents greet her. They're happy. They're asking her, why is she visiting so late? And she breaks down into tears as she tells her parents that her husband is hurting her. She ran away and she is begging them to let her come home. She will work at the store. She'll do whatever. She just wants to be able to divorce her husband. And At that point, her mom is so furious when she hears about how her daughter's been treated because specifically, apparently her husband had been the one to approach their family for the daughter's hand in marriage, even though the parents weren't sure because they do have a difference in their education levels. This is actually something he uses against Ozuki as he actually physically hits her as well. And so her mom is all for her divorcing because she thinks it's unreasonable. But her dad tells her that he understands it is difficult, but he asks her to consider the fact that her husband is currently sponsoring her brother to go to school and to also think of her son that she has of her husband. He tells her to reconsider, and she tearfully agrees after some, I think, convincing. And as she leaves, she can hear her dad crying in the house. I'll make my comment on that later. As she goes out, she calls for like a rickshaw, which is like, I guess, kind of like, you will see them in some Asian countries where it's one person running with a carriage, and that's how you go from place to place if you're able to afford it. So she calls down a rickshaw, and as the rickshaw gets closer to the station, I think it's like when they had trains, it slows down and tells her that it doesn't want to go any further. Now, it's late at night and she's crying, begging them to please just take her to the station because she doesn't want to walk. Of course, it's also dangerous. And it turns out that the rickshaw person is her childhood friend. Her childhood friend who was in love with her. So this childhood friend admits and tells her that after Ozuki got married, he made really bad lifestyle choices. And his mom ended up arranging him to be in a marriage, and it didn't work out. It was a bad match. He wasn't into it. So now he's divorced and he lives in a cheap hotel as he works as a rickshaw, rickshaw taxi. And as Otaha recounts how she was also in love with him, and she actually dreamed of marrying this childhood friend, and together they would run her family store because her family does have a business. And they both kind of cry. He ends up taking her to the station, and the ending, and this is a summary, by the way, Otaha lives the rest of her life in her husband's house, only seeing her sons through the eyes of like a doll because she's essentially kind of killed off her sense of self, and she's only existing because she knows, number one, her brother needs her husband's sponsorship, and number two, her responsibility is to raise her son. Now, they kind of go back. The ending literally says they go back to their sad, unfulfilled lives. It is so sad. It is so sad. But the point of this story, and the thing is, the dad cries, but he still demanded Ozuki to sacrifice. Like, her mom was all for it, but her dad demanded that she expected and knew she would sacrifice herself for her brother and her son. He specifically says, for her brother and her son. I think that one of the themes of this book is the expectations of society that women are expected to compromise. Not just compromise, I'll use a harsher word, sacrifice. Yes, it is very sad. And I think part of the reason that Otaha does not tell her parents that she was sexually harassed or that she had a hard time at work is because this is her mom's favorite story. And her mom specifically mentions, oh, did you think we didn't compromise? Or I think she says, like, do you think we had to compromise? Because she mentions that her mom also loved books and her dad was in a band. So it's kind of like they both compromised as expected of them by society. And I want to go into this because there are two main themes, I think, in this book. One is the role of woman, and the other one is growing up. There is a very strong connection in this book that growing up implies you must sacrifice as a woman. Now, there are, of course, male characters who also compromise and sacrifice, but I think there is a focus in this book about the expectation society has that women must compromise. Because we see it in the mentions of, yes, really helps with the context of the parents' interaction with Otaha when she was first going to the library. Exactly. I think it also shows a lot of Otaha's perception of her parents as well. because she knows that this is her mom's favorite story. So it really gives a lot of context. And I think it's especially significant when you look, and it's kind of why I kept mentioning like childishness and naivety. People at the night library are kind of defying society's expectations. They are pursuing their own path. They're not sacrificing. Remember, they're all really stubborn. They're pursuing what they think is right. Stubbornness is often seen as like a childish trait because a lot of times as an adult, you are expected to kind of like meet people in the middle, to kind of like, this isn't realistic. You should kind of face reality. There's always that kind of expectation. And I think that's why for Otaha, when she thinks of that, she doesn't want to mix these two worlds. To her, her parents represent everything she kind of wants to go against, and the Light Library is everything she wants for herself in her life. There's also so much emphasis about like the different female characters and their backstories and what they gave up. I personally think, and this is just my guess, probably why Kobayashi chose them, like she was gathering the Avengers. Also true, yes, very true, right? Because birds of a feather flock together. For me personally, I think Mizuki Takeshiro might be being pushed into an arranged marriage. I say this very lightly, very lightly. Part of the reason is, number one, it could be that she can't write anymore. But someone who can't write, it could be she couldn't write anymore, but I feel like there is an argument to be said about her resentment for the society's role and expectation of women and how she is trying to get rid of the books. Like, part of her is very attached. You can tell the books are well preserved, they're not dusty. She was very interested in designing a stamp, but she kind of backed away from it because I think part of her was wanting to separate herself from her books and the life that she had built for herself. Because don't forget, she lived in an apartment, and this is argued, that she could not be the author. She lives in an apartment where there's not much of anything. There's not many clothes, not many objects. It's mainly just books. So she clearly was trying to surround herself with what she liked, and she was defying society's expectations in a different way, whereas instead of being quote-unquote realistic, she chose to just focus on her books, and she was successful. She lived in a high-rise condo, successful author. She even kept her privacy. But somehow, for some reason, she's now having to give that up, and part of her is a little bitter. When she was holding the beer can, she wasn't red, wasn't slurring, wasn't disoriented, clearly clear of mind, but it's almost like she was using the beer to kind of numb herself, watching them take the books away. And this is just my conjecture. I don't know for sure. But there's definitely a lot to be said about like even Masako's background, where she was sacrificing. But now that she feels like she cannot read, she kind of can't give up on trying again. She said she's tried so many times to read books and she can't stop. She can't read. And not that she can't read anymore, but she can't immerse herself in books. But she still tries. Kind of like a kid who can't like admit that, or doesn't want to admit that things have changed, that they are no longer how they used to be. Ako is kind of naive in the sense that instead of just reaching out and talking to her daughter, she is going to sell her business, which is really important to her. It's her memory of her late husband, it's her dream and expectation for the future. She's selling it to try to put a lump sum in her daughter's account to try and get her daughter to like reach out to her instead of like actually speaking up and talking to her. You can argue that who actually spoke her mind and actually like said something to Kobayashi, Ako is still a little naive, a little unwilling. Yeah, no, definitely. Masako is very relatable. You also can argue that I think the female characters are definitely more fleshed out than the men. And it's not that the men don't have important narrative, it's that there is seemingly more of being shown through the female narratives by the specific author. I think that was my thoughts. I had more, but let me see. I'm going to briefly go through my notes, but that's kind of where I was going. Do you guys agree? Do you guys disagree? You can disagree. It's totally fine. It's why we're discussing. Oh, they also talked about Little Woman, but there was a connection I made in Little Woman because they mentioned specifically Lori and Joe, who did have affection for each other, but Lori was not in love with Joe. No, Joe was not in love with Lori. I mixed them up. I can argue that Lori and Joe is supposed to mirror Kobayashi and her oil baron, because he was madly in love with her, but she did not see him, or I guess love him enough, or like want to compromise in order to marry him. However, there is a part of her that kind of wonders what could have been. Now, Joe does, I think she's in love with her partner, but sorry, that one's not fleshed out enough. I didn't get into it because Anna Green Gables was more interesting for me. They were more interesting for you, say for Sasai and Chef. Yeah, I agree. Sasai and Chef were more fleshed out, except the chef. I think we're just interested because he made good food. But yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I just wrote everyone at Night Library living slightly unconventional lives. Except Manami, who does want to live conventionally. Oh, I also made a thought that what if Sasai is kind of hoping that by Otaha kind of being the Anne of the library, is that she will be able to help Kobayashi. Because remember, Sasai's whole life purpose is to help his aunt preserve the library and help his aunt prevent her from closing up. I think he sees Otaha as someone who could help him, and that's why he called her Anne. Because Anne in Anna Green Gables is the one who actually helps Lillian and also helps her open up. Because at first she was not, I think, keen on the idea of being on Anne, because she was hoping for someone who could help her. There's something there. Oh, he that matters. Yeah, it does matter. That's why I agreed. Yeah. Yeah, so that's one out of my thoughts. That's why I was like, is it romantic? Is it like more platonic? I don't know. Oh, also, Masako was a little bitter towards books. One of the most interesting quotes is when she says, "We're these books' servants, aren't we?" And the thing is, like, Masako is a little bitter towards books. I think library books in particular, because she kind of views library books as like one of the reasons why she feels like she might have missed out, kind of. But at the same time, she loves books. Like, she can't help wanting to try spending her vacation, because to them it's vacation, trying to read books again to confirm for sure if this time she has to face the facts that she cannot read. That's why I said it's kind of like, it's super interesting. When I first read this book, I thought it was very comforting, but as I kind of dove into it, I realized there was so much implied, and it was so interesting to get into. I think that's it. I think I had more to talk about, but in general, I covered most of the points I wanted to go through. What's my last question? Oh, okay. So we've kind of reached the end of today's discussion. Was there a moment in tonight's discussion that surprised you? Like, there was something we mentioned that you were like, oh, that was really interesting. Is there? Because I'll be honest, one of the things that I didn't really focus on was Tamura. I kind of did enjoy his segment, but I kind of brushed it off as like, oh, this is kind of interesting. But thinking back on that moment, I was like, oh yeah, that could have been a moment that inspired Otoha, and it was what like helped encourage her growth, because she went from someone who didn't dare speak up to finally being able to speak up for what she loved. Because she couldn't speak up to her parents, but she spoke up to Kobayashi. I'm trying to think, was there another moment that you guys brought up that I didn't really think of? Oh, I should have used the Q&A for like if there was something you guys wanted to talk about. Should I use it now? Let me see. You love all the research I did, saved you time to do it, and eventually Tamuru's part was rather quick, so it's fine. Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I did my best. I wish I could have given you guys more because I feel like there is more there for us to like dig into and like try to figure out and puzzle together. But hopefully, if you guys are interested, you can definitely check it out yourself as well. I might. I'll be honest. I'm sleepy. I'm gonna have to sleep. But it was so fun to discuss and talk to you guys about it. Tomorrow's part was quick, but I feel like most of the book is fairly quick. So, but it's always, like I said, interesting to see what different people latch onto. Also, the fact that they keep using cats in like the imagery, but there's no cats in the book. I think. Start a poll. If that's it, that's all I had for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me into this book club. That was so much fun, and I definitely feel a little more comfortable hosting more book clubs in the future. I really enjoy being able to like discuss with you guys. And I think this format works better for me rather than me trying to retell the whole book and then not having time to like properly discuss with you. But anyways, thank you so much for joining in, whether you are chatting, lurking, or watching the VOD. It was so much fun to be able to like share the ideas and hear your guys' opinions and see what you guys latched onto. And I appreciate that you guys were here to listen to me and my theoretical yapping. As always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to check out the community post for the specific bookmarks. Jelly buds, blooms, and blossoms are traveling through all the books. The next book we will be voting on, I think, give me a week to kind of recover. And then I will have you guys vote for the next book that will be for August. The next book club will be in August. So I'll give you guys 2 weeks to like vote for the books. I'll give you, I think, 2 or 3 options. If you guys have any cozy books you'd like to recommend, please put them in the comment section below. I am gladly taking suggestions because it's always going to be interesting to see what you guys are interested in talking about. And if you guys have any questions or things you thought of or other things you want to talk about, feel free to put them in the comment section below as well. I will do my best to engage and answer with you guys there. We can still continue the discussion even after the live stream has concluded. And you know what? That's okay. You should read the books that you like. The books I cover in this book club will typically be pretty cozy, but I hope that we're able to not only enjoy them, but discuss them and see, you know, what's kind of beneath the cozy. This book was a surprise, though. I will say I thought we would talk more about the mystery, but unexpectedly, the themes were just too interesting. They were just too interesting. But yeah, thank you. I really hope you guys enjoyed the stream as well. Remember to drink water, stretch, and take care of yourselves. I definitely need a lot more water. But it was really good. I'm so glad we got to chat. And I'm trying to remember. My next stream will be Sunday. We'll be playing Tomodachi Life in the daytime because I think they'll be more active then. I do have some exciting streams for next week. We will be playing a demo. I'm trying to remember. Yes, I think I'll be playing a demo next week, but don't forget, I will not be streaming on Monday next week because my Vtuber Oshi for singing, Rika from Hollow Stars, is going to be graduating, so I will not be streaming on Monday to try and catch his graduation stream. Otherwise, I'll be streaming Tomodachi Life Sunday, Mystria on Wednesday because I did unfortunately miss it. I appreciate you guys understanding. Unexpected sickness. And then Friday will likely either be a demo or, if I got the dates right, we might be playing a new release there is a game I signed up for, and I did receive a code for it, so potentially could be playing that. I'm trying to remember the date. Today is the 6th, 7th. Nope, okay, won't be on time. So that game will be until next week. Anyways, that's gonna be it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. Whether you are chatting, lurking, watching the VOD, subscribing, joining memberships, I do appreciate you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, or evening, wherever you are. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Ria, a reader who loves the rain. I stream 4 times a week, except next week. If you like Pokemon, Digimon, Otome, or Cozy games, you should subscribe. For the very last time, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you in another stream. Until next time!